Yes, thank you, Kevin. Sorry, I had to unmute. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Statement. Okay, this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy Committee meeting, which is taking place via teleconference. Notice of this meeting was posted to the board's website. As there is not a physical quorum present, a statement of necessity is read into the record and filed with the Tennessee Secretary of State as required by statute. Pursuant to TCA 844-108B2, if a physical quorum is not present at the location of a meeting of a governing body, then in order for a quorum of members to participate by electronic or other means of communication, the governing body must make a determination that necessity exists. That determination must include a recitation of the facts and circumstances on which it was based. Further, TCA 844-108A3 defines necessity as matters to be considered by the governing body at that meeting require timely action by the body. That physical presence by a quorum of the members is not practical within the period of time requiring action, and that participation by a quorum of the members by electronic or other means of communications is necessary. As stated, this is a regularly scheduled meeting for the Tennessee State Board of Accountancy Committee. The purpose of this meeting, with members attending by teleconference, is to conduct a quarterly scheduled meeting of the board via teleconference due to COVID-19. All voting will be conducted by roll call. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I think we'll go ahead and proceed directly into our committee meeting agenda. The first committee up is licensing, chaired by Gay Moon, and we've got several potential action items here to kind of work through. And Gay, I'll turn it over to you for the licensing committee activities.
Thank you, Kevin. Just as a reminder to everybody, the Prometric centers were closed March 17th through April 30th. The reopening was dependent upon local protocols, and at times seating availability immediately after this was very limited. In May, we voted to extend the time for sections expiring April 1 through September 30 until December 31, 2020. The reason I'm reminding you all of this is because several of these cases are COVID related, and this is just a reminder of what we've done. The first extension request is Carter Chandler. His section for BEC expires 3/31/2020, and FAR expires 12/31/2020. He had planned to sit for regulation and audit in March of 2020. On March 3rd, he got sick going to a healthcare provider, and at that time was instructed to quarantine for 14 days. We have been provided emails supporting his request for time off, unpaid leave from his employers at different times during the month of March. The emails do indicate that this was related to sitting for the exam and finishing up. We have his urgent care visit summary. We have support that his audit exam confirmation notice to sit was for the March 10th, 2020 exam. We have, Wendy has talked to him, and we have found out that he took the audit section on 9/9/2020 and he has passed. Regulation is scheduled for October 29th of this month. I don't believe, Wendy, and you can confirm this, that we have received confirmation that he had a reg. He's told us it was scheduled in March, but I don't think we've gotten anything to confirm the date that it had been scheduled. Is that right, Wendy?
That's correct. And so he was approved to schedule and approved to sit, but he did not schedule it. And
okay.
he recently confirmed that he only scheduled audits.
Okay. So he has asked that we extend his BEC to 12/31/2020. His reasoning was because of his illness, he was unable to schedule and sit for regulation and audit within the time period of March. So with that little background, I will open it up to discussion.
Hey, Gabe, this is Stephen. Which one did you say he passed in September?
Audit.
Okay, so he's okay. I have zero problem extending that one BEC to 12/31. That's my request.
Anybody else have any? I'm kind of, he got sick. And I know we've not extended things for people, but COVID was a little bit different. He was under quarantine, and even if he had time to reschedule before March 10th, he had a 14-day quarantine period. So there really wasn't a chance. Does anybody else have comments?
Yeah, I would agree. I have one question. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Maybe I'm missing something here, but it seems like if his credit expired on BEC 7 months ago in March, why was he not asking for this before now? I mean, I know he was sick, but that's 7 months ago. It seems like we've been here lately getting a lot of extension requests from people that waited like forever to ask for an extension when they knew they were going to need it a long time ago.
You know, I don't know why he waited until, I believe, let's see, the first email.
Didn't he say he contacted NASA and was told one thing and then found out another?
Yes.
I think that's right. Trying to find.
I think we had someone before who, I mean, they didn't know that they could appeal to the board for an extension as well. So it could be that they don't know that this is something that they could use to get an extension.
That's true. He may not have been aware that he could request an extension. And the circumstances were a little bit unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments? Do we have a motion to approve his extension?
So moved. I'll make a motion to recommend to the board that we grant him an extension on BEC. All right.
Is there a second?
BEC to 12/31/20.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we need a roll call vote.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Pam Church,
Aye.
Grease Bec, Judy Weatherby,
You're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
I've got multiple devices going here and I can't figure out which one unmutes me. So sorry about that.
Was that a yes or a no from Judy?
I've recorded that as a yes.
It is not.
Okay.
It is not.
I couldn't hear her. Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. All right, moving on to the next one.
You skipped me on the vote.
You're not on this committee.
Gay, that was my fault. He is on the committee, on the the committee sheet, but on the committee agenda, I forgot to move him up to licensing. So I apologize.
Trying to kick me off the committee.
No, I'm glad you're on this committee, Steve. Looking at our agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Eldridge. I have you recorded as a yes vote.
Okay. All right. The next one is Harper. And this one is unusual as well. She is asking for an extension of all of her expired units sections because of family issues, healthcare providing, etc. I'll just tell you, this would be a real stretch for me to extend. The only way that we could get all of 4 passed within an 18-month period is if we extended BEC, which expired back in 2016, and extended that for 18 months. But I just feel like too much time has gone past for this request. So I will for discussion.
Gay, I'm going to have to recuse myself on this one.
Okay. All right.
I'm not on this committee. I'm not running for this committee, speaking up. I think this is an example of what I was talking about. I mean, this is just too far down the road. 4 years and 3 years, and I mean, I feel for her situation. She's had a lot of things going on. I still understand that. I just think I'm hearing a lot of feedback from her. But I just think it's way too far down.
Yeah.
There you go.
Am I still here? Anyway, I just think there's been too much water over the bridge, as they say in East Tennessee, to go back on this one. And I think it opens the door to a lot of people that would say, hey, I didn't know you could go that far back.
I agree with what y'all both said. I mean, my notes were, I just can't get there on this one. I mean, none of this is affected by the coronavirus, in my opinion, because she expired in 9/30/19, I think was the last expiration. And I just think, like Larry said, and I think Gay said too, it's going to open up too much criticism of us if we let this happen this time. I can't get there.
Okay, does anybody want to make a motion that we deny
40454544096 is
I'll make a motion to recommend to the board that we deny this request.
second? Can I second that, Wendy? Okay, any discussion? All right, we're ready for a roll call vote.
Gay Moon,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
race and re-record. Press 3 to continue recording where you left off. Press 4.
Judy Weatherby,
Are you still there? If you are satisfied with your message, press 1 to listen to your message. Press
Judy, you got 2 WebEx meetings open. You only need 1. I think that's what's causing your problem. Okay, now you need to connect your audio either to your phone or your computer. So if you look at the bottom, there's a button with 3 ellipses. And you can either have WebEx call into your phone or your computer. There you go. Can you hear us?
Sorry, y'all. I think I have my problem fixed now.
We can hear you.
Okay, good.
Hi, Judy. I didn't get your vote on this last motion.
I don't think I heard the motion, actually. I don't know what was going on with my technical stuff here. I switched computers, so I might have missed. What was it? I don't think we should extend it, so I don't know.
The motion was to deny the extension of her credit.
Okay, I agree with that motion.
I have all ayes with Dr. Church recused.
All right, the next one is Sharp. And let's see. She is requesting an extension of time until February 21st, 2021 to make up for the 49 days lost due to Prometric closure. Actually, there was only a 30-day closure because March was blacked out from March 11th through the end of the month. So there's only 30 days that she lost. Wendy, did you ever respond to your email about if she scheduled any of the parts that were remaining, or?
No, I do not have a response from her. And I forwarded you her updated score report where she had sat, I don't know that it matters, but she sat in August for BEC but did not pass.
So she's asking for this extension. Reg expires 12/31/2020. I don't know if we ought to give her a 30-day extension. I mean, she's asking for 49-day extension. So, comments?
I think at most I would say, my opinion when I read this is just because the testing site was closed doesn't mean you can't prepare for the exam. I mean, I know that sounds harsh, but I mean, it didn't expire. You could have been ready when they got back online, but I wouldn't put up a fight if we wanted to do just for that one part.
I think we need to be careful because everybody was affected by that same closure period. So whatever we do for her, we should be prepared to do for anyone. I mean, to me, this has significant implications.
That's why I would prefer to deny it, to be honest with you.
I think Pam made a good point, and maybe if it's 30 days, that's what we do and becomes somewhat of a precedent if it comes up again.
Another piece to add, just as a reminder, that we continuous testing started July 1st, which NASBA calculates gives everyone an additional 42 days a year to potentially sit. So it does give them some extra opportunity that they were not afforded prior to that change.
Okay, that's true, because they can, if they get the failure score, they can turn right around and resit for it without it having to wait until the next testing window. So that is a valid. I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, and additionally, they eliminated the blackout days window as well.
Here again, I'm
okay.
Not, but she hasn't been taking any of the other parts since May when it reopened, since the site reopened. So she's only passed one section and hasn't been taking any of the. She's wanted to extend that one section, but she's not been showing any attempt to pass any of the others. She's not been doing
just to make sure I'm clear, I received an updated score report from the time that you all received these documents, and she did sit on August 10th for BEC. She did not pass, but that is the only time that she has sat since January.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point. She's not, I don't see an attempt to do any of the other sections, but she wants extension on this one. Other than that one you just mentioned.
Are people able to get seats easily now? I mean, because I know for the first part of the summer, you know, there was being able to set up the time. So are they able to sit now pretty easily for the exam?
I've heard yes. The feedback I've heard is that it has not been a problem in recent months. Wendy, have you heard that?
Yes, I think I put some feelers out probably in July, and I think at our July meeting, Andy actually got several pieces of feedback that really since around the beginning of July, things had opened up and folks were able to get seats.
Okay.
We adopted, go ahead.
No.
When we were deciding everything around COVID and when NASPA was considering that, what did we decide as a board last time we discussed that, or the time before? Did we pretty much say just individual candidates? We did not approve any blanket extensions, am I right?
I thought we extended September 1st to 12/31.
We extended anything that expired between April 1 and September 30. Those were automatically extended to December 31, 2020.
Right. So that's,
yes.
Was hers one of those, or was hers December already? I'm curious.
She's 12/31.
She would have been without the automatic extension.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I mean, since we already decided that, I just think we'd have to give it to anybody who expired up to December now. And we had decided on September. So I just don't think that when we decided that, we opened the door for this. I do not think we did.
Let me clarify the extension that was approved on a blanket. It was anyone April 1st through December 30 was approved to December 31st. But you're correct, she does not fall into that category because hers does not expire until March of 2021. I'm sorry.
I thought hers expired.
I'm sorry. Yes, hers expires the day after, right, 12/31. So no one that has a 12/31/20 has been extended.
And I think we'd have to extend them all if we extend her. That's my opinion. I think we considered all this when we came up with that policy myself.
I agree. And Wendy, didn't you say earlier that what did you counsel? And they said they're recommending us a blanket extension on this.
Sorry, say that again, Stephen.
You mentioned to me one time that it was frowned upon for us to do a blanket extension based on consistency with the other states.
Right. So the blanket extension we have provided is fairly consistent with all the other 55 jurisdictions. If we do an additional blanket extension, then we would be outside of what other jurisdictions are doing, based on what I know today.
I'll be glad to make a motion to recommend to the board that we deny this request.
Would you say that again, Stephen?
I said I'll make a motion to recommend to the full board that we deny this request.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call. Any discussion? Take a roll call vote.
Gay Moon.
Yes.
Pam Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
John Griesbeck. Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Okay. We will recommend to the full board that we deny her extension. The last credit extension request is a student living in China, Ms. Angela Wang, that we did this last, I can't remember if it was in July or May, but there was a young student who was from Wuhan and clearly could not get back into the United States to sit for the exam. I did confirm there are no testing sites inside of China. I think India may be the closest place. And of course, there's disallowed travel between China and India. And of course, obviously China and the US. So this person has asked for an extension of time. Well, lost that date. Wendy, when did?
She has two parts that she was able to get in prior to the travel restrictions, and those expire 3/31/21. And she is suggesting an extension until August of 2021. I would suggest that you consider the decision made at the last meeting where we had another individual from China. We extended those credits till 12/31/2021, not knowing when this travel restriction is going to be lifted.
Comments?
Based on the last one we talking about, the one we did at 12/31/21, what was their extension? What was their expiration date? Do you happen to know that, Pam?
Give me a minute and I'll try to find it.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't remember what their date was, but with the travel restrictions, we decided to just give them another 12 months because there's no way of knowing when travel between China and the US is going to be opened up again.
So I assume we're making the difference between this case and the ones we've talked about earlier today based on the fact that they have actually got a travel restriction and can't,
correct,
in the foreseeable future, physically get here.
Correct. I think Wendy, didn't that the other gentleman were his parts expiring between 4/1 and September 30?
No, I've pulled up his record, and he has had one expiring 12/31/20 and one expiring March 31st/21.
Okay. So her expiration of what she's passed would be March 31 of 2021. That would be consistent with what we did in July.
Correct.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to grant an extension for two remaining parts of the FAR and reg. No, actually, no, sorry. BEC, I'll send them to 12/31/2021 based on the fact that this person for the foreseeable future is unable to physically travel to the United States and take the examination.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Okay, let's take a roll call vote.
Gay Moon,
Yes.
Pamela Church,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
Aye.
John Griesbeck,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby. Aye.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is an update to the state-specific ethics exam. Wendy, want to give us a little bit of a review on what's been going on with that?
Sure. I think we also have some TSCPA folks on the call, so if we can give them a chance to jump in after I kind of go over this to add any additional comments or thoughts they have. First, I have just an update for you that is kind of our once-a-year revisit of the state ethics program. As a reminder, we have a memorandum of understanding with the TSCPA that they will provide course content for the ethics course, and they will allow sponsors to purchase that content and provide that to licensees, provided that we also approve them at the board as a designated sponsor. TSCPA also delivers the course that they create. They currently are delivering that via webcast replay, and live presentations when and if they're able to do that. They had an interactive version that did not see the demand of the other formats, so they do not have that available right now. The additional sponsors that we've approved during the year 2020 are listed on the document that I gave you. That includes Beacon Hill, Becker, Checkpoint Learning, Thomson Reuters, CPE Training Consortium, Kaplan Smart Pros, MTSU, and Perry Moore. Those are approved for 2020. We haven't received as many comments yet this year as we have received at this point in prior years, but I also think people have delayed a little bit, not able to have live courses, that maybe that has affected that a little bit. I talked to Perry Moore last week, and he had only done 2 courses so far this year, and provided a couple of evaluations, but no comments really with those. We did receive some comments from the what I would call self-study providers. I had some concerns over some of the comments, indicating that the presenters were reading from the slides, and I just wanted to get a sense of those courses. So we asked the sponsors to review their courses just to make sure that they were using the correct content, and if there were anything else that came out of that. So Sherry graciously agreed to review 6 hours worth of state ethics content from Becker, Checkpoint, and Kaplan. Beacon Hill replays the TSCPA course, and so it's the exact same. It's a stream of their course. So Sherry reviewed those 3 courses, and at the bottom are some, her general comments of those 3 were that they all, as required, use TSCPA materials. For the most part, the presenters did read from the slides, and the questions that they had developed at the end of their courses were not necessarily ideal, but they created those because they have to in order to have it qualify for self-study CPE through NASPA. So that is just something that they're required to do. When we first went this direction, the intent of the board was that this course would be a live course. And, but we allowed other sponsors to provide the course, provided that they did it as an instructor-led course. And so that's kind of why we find ourselves in a position where some of them are having speakers that just seem to read from the slides. So it's instructor-led, but because it's replayed and becomes self-study, it's less engagement and more of the speaker just talking on the screen. So as you'll see from the comments, some people really like the self-study courses, the ease of the material, and the convenience of it. The improvements, of course, were that instructor read from the slides. It was hard to pay attention. Solution case studies were never really clear and not concluded in a precise manner. I think that concludes the comments. I know that TSCPA spoke to the board last year at this time, and they did do a slight price increase, which I noted on the last couple pages of the document that I provided you all. So the individual price is $40 per licensee, and then the per person price from a sponsor who elects to pay in that manner is $25 per person rather than $20. So that's an overview of where we've been this past year. Does anyone have any comments? Does anyone have any questions for TSCPA?
Kara, would you like to say anything to the board about your views on how this year has gone?
Sure, I'm happy to. This year we worked with Jennifer Wesky, professor at Christian Brothers University, to develop the updated course. There were not a lot of significant changes to the outline that this board approved last year, but Jennifer did update case studies, worked with Sherry to get information to incorporate into the course, and we did update most of the slides since this is a recurring requirement, just to give it a different look and feel for licensees. I do agree with what Wendy said. I think probably most sponsors are off to a little bit slower start this year. I know we get reports monthly from the sponsors who have purchased the content from us, and those reports have been fairly slow and low number of licensees who have taken the course from those sponsors so far. As Wendy mentioned, TSCPA is again offering it in webcast replay and on demand, which are two most popular formats, and so we're getting a good response to that. Typically, all of the TSCPA chapters will offer a state-specific ethics session. Our chapters are not meeting in person this year because of COVID, so I would expect that most of those members who typically have gotten the state-specific ethics credit from their chapter meetings will likely get that from our on-demand or webcast replay this year. The on-demand and webcast is Dr. Jennifer Wesky presenting the course. We try to rotate that each year, so I would not expect that Dr. Wesky would be the presenter next year, but we try to get a different speaker to do that, just to keep it fresh and get new examples and case studies and things of that nature. I don't think I've got any other updates at this point. We would not be proposing a price increase this year since we did just update that last year, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you, Kara. Any questions?
I was wondering, is there a way for any board member who wants to see the course to see it without paying for it?
Sure, I'm happy to send you the link, and any other board member, Janet, if you would like to review it, we can send it to the full board.
Okay.
That would be appreciated, Kara. Thank you.
Can you send the answers too, Kara?
Oh my. Any other questions for Kara? Okay, the next thing we need to do is to approve the outline. This was sent to you all earlier, and there were some items in red. What's new covers COVID a little bit. Maybe that addresses CPE questions, and then some suggestions for some cases were there at the bottom. Any comments? Or Wendy, would you like to say anything about the outline?
Yeah, I'll make a couple comments. Thank you, Gay. There isn't a lot new. Sherry reviewed the course. I think we have a good outline in place. There weren't changes to law and rules this year. And so we just really made some suggestions in the what's new area to talk about anything related to COVID. The most common question we're getting is any potential extensions to CPE requirements. So that may be as easy as that, just clarifying that there have been no extensions to date, or if the board chooses to do something else, making sure that that is in there as well. Under the enforcement case examples, these are items that we've seen over the past year, and they're items to consider as part of maybe case studies. And so Sherry can certainly pull out some of the cases that we had related to these items and help TSCPA with a case study in those areas, if that would be helpful. The outline is not meant to necessarily have to include all of those items. They're to be considered as current issues the board's dealt with.
Okay, so our committee's job is to vote on whether or not we recommend this outline. So does anybody have any questions or suggestions that we should consider going into the outline?
I think we may be covered. I'm not on the comment and the question. I'm thinking that at last meeting, we covered that CPE requirements covered some of the issues that we had. So because we get a lot of, I guess, items in the legal report related to CPE, and maybe there's not enough understanding with how many hours are required and some of those types of things. And then also in the peer review area, that we had looked back into the course to make sure the appropriate information is being communicated. Am I remembering that right, Wendy?
Janet, are you saying we talked about adding those things to the state ethics course?
I was thinking that we said we had kind of checked the ethics course to make sure that those items that seem to be issues coming up in our legal report, those items are being covered so that there's not a, well, I didn't know type of condition.
Yes, and those things are covered in the course. The peer review requirements, so, maybe we, think of a way to change that up a bit, but it certainly is covered, as well as the new CPE requirements, reporting requirements. So I think we're covered as far as it's included. Now, now we just need to get people to pay attention.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to add that, I assume it's in the report, but like if they send any kind of review and they're not in the peer review program to any state board, that everybody that takes the course needs to understand you're going to get turned into us, period. I mean, I don't know if they're that direct or not, but it seems like we have more issues around that subject than anything else, where somebody is not in peer review, they issue an audit or review report, and most of the time it's a review report to a state board for licensing.
We can certainly, it's in the outline, but we can certainly try to brainstorm on better ways to present that, or maybe presenting it in a couple of different ways so that that really hits home with the folks that are taking the course. Sometimes we note from those individuals, actually, Andy, we go back and they either miss that taking that course, so they miss the ethics course. And so, of course, then they miss the information. So they kind of are in violation twice at that point.
I was just going to add, I know in the current course that one of the case studies under the peer review actually talks about a board of contractor review. So indirectly, they should be kind of being made aware of the fact that the board gets those type of referrals as well.
Great. Any other discussion? Are we ready to make a motion to recommend to the board that they approve this outline as presented to us?
One additional question, Gay, just to make sure that Kara, does this present any questions or concerns? Does it seem to be clear?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I move we accept this outline as provided.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion? Let's take a roll call.
Gay Moon.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge.
Aye.
John Griesbeck. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Aye.
Thank you. Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Okay, last item on our agenda is BEC review course. We have been asked to decide if we want to approve this course that's being presented by the Lipscomb University as an upper division accounting course, as it would qualify somebody for their sitting for the exam qualifications. So right now we have approved FAR, audit and regulation review courses as upper division accounting. So it seems kind of unusual that we haven't done BEC before, but I think there's been some concern that it's more of just a business class. Lipscomb did provide in the materials their learning objectives. Those included internal controls, cost accounting concepts, critical thinking skills through analysis of task-based simulations and exercises, and perform various economic and financial analysis. So, any comments or questions that you might have as to whether or not we should consider this as an upper division accounting?
Gay, one thing as the discussions occur, my intent was to not necessarily accept just this course, but any of the BEC exam review courses that universities may offer. The board could choose to do just this one if they want, but I think it'll be easier if the board is willing to look at them all together, any course.
Excellent point. Thank you. All right, discussion.
My issue is kind of based on what Wendy just said as well, is if we blanket this, I was just looking at this course, and if I looked at it right, it looked like 1/6 of the time could be considered accounting. I think it was a cost accounting class that was one of them. But if we're going to just allow this as a blanket, and let's say that ABC University has no cost accounting, and it's just a bunch of business classes, are we not granting credit? It's not accurate. I guess if I look at it correctly, it's about 50-50. I think it was 16-14 based on the survey of boards that do it. Is that right, Wendy? It was 14-16 or 16-14.
Yes. So I sent out for those of you on the committee, I sent up a follow-up quick poll this morning in case you didn't see that in your email. But I asked NASPA to poll all the states as to how they handle exam review courses. And I sent over the results. So it appears that of the 30 folks that responded, 16 allow for exam review courses, 14 do not. Is that the question? Go ahead.
Let me restate my point. I don't think I explained that well.
Okay.
My point is, I don't want to get into a situation where we go in and say, okay, based on this one, let's say this is correct. 1/6 is going to be of the time is going to be counted because 1/6 is all accounting. And let's say that, like I said, ABC College has got 2/6 and so forth. It's not going to be consistent. So I mean, it's my opinion. It's either we do it or we don't. And it would be my opinion that based on the small amount of accounting that's in there, just so y'all don't have to go make some manual calculations every time somebody submits it, that we decline the request. And I think that would put us in an even group, 15, 14 or 16 group.
I have mixed feelings. If you look at reg, for example, a significant portion of that is business law. And under the new format for the exam, of course, that's 3 years out, I guess. But we're going to downplay some of the tax and move that to a specialty area, so it may be even more business law. Well, that's a general business topic. So when you start trying to measure how much is accounting, I think that's tough. A portion of BEC is finance, and we certainly know that finance and accounting overlap many times. I mean, I can tell you that the content of courses and textbooks will certainly overlap. So a little bit, well, I should throw in my personal bias. I don't particularly like granting upper division credit for any review courses because it is review. But if we're going to do it, I just think we need to do it for all the sections. The questionnaire you sent, Wendy, asked about whether they accept business law toward the 150 and then whether they accept it as accounting. And let's see. And so a lot more counted toward the 150 than counted toward accounting. So obviously everybody, a lot of people are going through the same quandary. But the third one said, does it accept all section content? But it didn't say whether for 150 or for accounting. So anyway, that one was kind of tough to interpret. So I think from that questionnaire, you can tell that other states are going through the question as well, but they're reviewing for becoming a CPA. And we have said that passing that content in BEC is part of becoming a CPA. So I just think that it's at least as much accounting as reg is, or close to being that. And I would say if we accept one, we should accept all.
Okay, this is Kevin. I feel similarly to Pam. To me, it's hard to make a distinction to carve out a course relating to one section versus the other. I just can't get there. And so I would be comfortable accepting them all, as Pam indicated. In this particular case, it's pretty clear that it's targeted toward folks that are attempting to sit for and pass the exam. And I can't easily find a way to say, well, yes to reg and no to BEC. That's kind of where I come out.
So let me make sure I'm understanding. If you look at item number 3, it says if you allow exam course credit, does your state accept all section content if not explained? And so they said yes, but then at the bottom it says that audit, FAR, and reg count towards the accounting requirements, and BEC is towards business. So does this mean that the 23 people that said yes, they all 23 grant audit, FAR, and reg for accounting, but they don't? There's only 4 that would grant BEC towards business, or the grant towards accounting.
No, Stephen. The comments below are comments of individual states that seemed relevant to the question. So that's
okay. So those are just specifics.
That's
okay.
just one state saying that they accept it like we do. They accept 3 sections towards accounting, and the BEC can be used in other areas.
So the real, I guess, poll that would apply to this would be number 1, which is 16 to 14. Is that, you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm inclined, I agree with Pam and Kevin in that this is a course to help people prepare and sit and pass the CPA exam. So it seems like there would be enough accounting in there to qualify. Any other comments?
Does this open the door if I take a business management class, got a little bit of accounting in there, that I can get credit for that based on over time?
I couldn't understand you, Stephen.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Does this change the stakes if I go take a general business management class that's got one portion of it as general accounting or general finance? Does that not open the door up for that to be counted as upper level accounting as well?
I view this that because it is a course that is a CPA review course, BEC review course, it's very specific. It's not a general business class. And I think that makes it a bit different.
What if I'm getting I'm being hypothetical. What if I'm getting my MAC and I want to count that towards my credit? Will that general business class count towards accounting since it's helping me get my master's in accounting?
It's not a CPA review course. I mean, we're being pretty specific in saying it is a BEC review course.
Like I said, I'm not arguing with you. You know, I'm big on consistency on that. So that's where I'm getting at with this. I don't want to open up Pandora's box. I'm not there on this, but I'll leave it at that.
It's that's very valid, and we don't want to open up, but I do think that a BEC review course is a little bit different from just a general business course.
And Gabe, this is a BEC review course that gets college or university credit, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, to clarify, Janet, if somebody took a Becker review course outside of a university, that would not count. You have to receive credit for it on the transcript from the accredited university.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
So I have to throw in what I've said before, because I think this needs to be considered in the future. There is generally no difference between a Becker CPA review course that counts for college credit and one that does not. Generally, the student does. Used to, the professor turned on the videos. Now the student does his or her own self-study. And yes, they assign a professor to the course, but there is no instruction generally from that professor, because the whole course is that the student takes Becker. There are exceptions, but that is the norm. And just overall, let's say that each section has a course. That's 4 sections times 3 credits, which would be 12, or times 4 credits, which would be 16. That is a large percentage of our upper division accounting credit that we require to sit for the CPA exam. And it has helped some students I know who've gone back to school. You know, they love it, but this just seems inappropriate. We used to have to prove that courses were not review courses in order for them to count for accreditation. And that's no longer true. I'm pretty sure that Texas does not allow CPA review to count, at least toward accounting, and I don't know about the 150. Now, with that said, my premise here is still to approve this, because if we're going to count any review courses, I think we need to count all of them. But I am fighting the whole CPA profession, I realize, when I say I just think they need new information in their courses, and it bothers me that we grant a lot of credit for Becker or any other review course. I just have to say that. Thank you.
But aren't these, just a thought, aren't these considered more of a prep course rather than a course to teach somebody accounting? I mean, could I get my whole accounting degree based on taking Becker?
You know, you don't have to have a degree. You don't have to have a degree, of course. So if someone's retooling and they have a management degree or an English degree or whatever, you know, they're just marking off the credits that they need to sit for the CPA exam. So they could take whatever they have to sit for the exam. And in Tennessee, we don't define the courses very well, you know, very specifically, which I like. But if you're not getting a degree, you don't have to take specific courses. But also, I can tell you that some universities in Tennessee allow students to get a significant portion of their graduate hours through CPA review. That is a true statement.
Okay, I just remember, it's been a long time. I just remember my CPA review was short-term learn and just to get through.
And that's how it used to be. I mean, there didn't, like I say, back, gosh, in the 80s and 90s, for a business program to be accredited, you had to prove that your courses that you were granting credit for were not review. And then, I don't know, you know, a lot has changed, and you really need a review course now, generally, to pass the exam. And you do learn some new material through those review courses, but they're not the same as, you know, what you're saying is the courses you remember as academic courses. So anyway, but that's the way the profession has gone. And I think we should be consistent. So
that's just my point. I mean, I'm just saying, I don't see as big of a difference between a master's level business accounting, or I'm sorry, general business class and this prep course. I'm just saying, I think that there could be a correlation drawn between the two, and I just think we need to consider the consistency between that for that. Because I could make a strong argument that that general business class that has that one class of accounting is probably a stronger class, long term than just a quick cram course. I won't say about that. I just want to make sure we consider that.
If I could interject just for a second, to me, if they know the material and they can pass the test, that course, if that helps them do that, well, I don't know why we wouldn't allow it to count.
I sure wouldn't want my wife operating on me if she just managed to learn enough material to do that surgery on me, and then she forgot it 2 weeks later and just crammed for it, but the day before. That would be.
I would think that the test is a lot better test than somebody being able to do something that impromptu to be able to get through it.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve accepting BEC review courses as an upper division accounting class?
I make the motion that we approve.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any additional discussion? All right, let's take a roll call vote.
Gay Moon,
Yes.
Ella Church,
Aye.
Stephen Eldridge,
No.
Griesbeck,
Aye.
Judy Weatherby,
Aye.
All right. We will recommend to the board that they approve BEC exam review courses as upper division accounting. And Kevin, that is the end of the licensing committee's agenda.
Right. Thank you, Gay, and thank you, members of the licensing committee. Y'all had a full plate on your hands this afternoon. What I would suggest is we go ahead and go to the enforcement committee and complete that committee's work, and then we'll take a short break and then come back afterwards to deal with laws and rules in the executive committee. Andy, Mr. Chairperson, are you ready to commence the enforcement committee's work?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I'm ready.
All righty.
Welcome, everybody. We actually sent out the case and complaint report earlier. Wendy did, and so there's a summary there. It looks like from that summary for individual CPAs, we have 3 that we've received but have not completely acted on yet. In the second category there, we've got under legal consent and formal, we actually have 2 that are, one is a consent order proposed and the other is a legal formal charges authorized. Then we have 2 in the legal closed payment plan. And then we have 3 that are in litigation monitoring. One respondent has not has appealed the case, but due to COVID, nothing else has happened. And then we have 2 that are in litigation. And under firms, we have 2. One that we have not, a response has been requested from staff, and then the other is a legal formal charge has been authorized, and a hearing is expected on that one. We've got our fiscal year numbers. It looks like that down there you got fiscal year 21. Of course, it's only 3 months in it, but you've got fiscal year 20, 19, 18, 17, and 16. On average there, we've had 90 complaints. You can see that as they kind of go up and down there. If you take the 3 months in 21, which probably is not a good sample at all, but that would be on average of 40. So I would say that it's kind of loaded on the backside when we get to the end of the year. So that probably is going to increase. So any questions on any of the case and complaint report? All right.
Andy, let me just confirm with or clarify for the group that these are cases that are not on your legal report. They are basically in inventory and they're in some other status that we're working through. And we are well behind the number of complaints we typically have this time of year. We just have not seen very many complaints filed at all. And I don't know exactly why that is, but it makes our load a little easier. We also are not filing very many CPE complaints this year. So that's usually a good 10 or so that we file related to CPE around this time of year. So we'll talk more about that in a while, but those were my additional comments.
And I know you're going to talk about that later. It's probably related to our new reporting format. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any questions or anything else?
I have a question on the open complaint detail report.
Okay, go ahead.
And I guess this is for Wendy, or maybe to Wendy and Maria. There's three kind of in the middle there. The one issue, I guess I'm here kind of see all the ones that most of us on the board didn't even know that were out there anymore because they were so old. But this one that says SEC issue that's dated back in 18. The one where we keep putting off the hearing because of various reasons.
I'm going to let Maria probably speak to this. You know, we have been in contact with the respondent on this one, or legal has, trying to encourage them to sign the order. And they've been working through that. So I don't know if Maria or even Stuart have anything they would like to add on that one.
I couldn't really hear, Larry, are you talking about the SEC issue? Is that what I heard? That case?
Right.
Okay, Stuart's been working on that one. So I'll let him answer.
Been working with the respondent on that.
We can't hear you, Stuart. I guess, Stuart, can you hear us? We can't hear you.
Now can you hear me?
Give us a test. 1, 2, 3.
I think just getting closer to your microphone, Stuart.
It's right here.
All right, that's better.
Okay. Yeah, I've been talking to the respondent, and we are working on a resolution with that case. Another issue is that person is not in accountancy anymore, not practicing as an accountant or CPA in Tennessee. They have actually been trying to take the bar exam to become an attorney. I don't know if that's better or worse, but so it's been kind of going back and forth, and because of COVID, the bar exam is continuing to be pushed out, and they're trying to get through that right now. So we are in the midst of an actual resolution in that case and an agreement.
Okay. So the other one that I had a question on was back in 18 also. The payment plan penalty. Does that mean that this is still going to be open until the payment plan has been completed, or what?
Yes, Larry. Sometimes they will, you know, let's say the penalty's large and they don't have the money to pay for it. Then I think we've given up to 12 months for them to make equal payments in order to satisfy that. And we keep it on here to make sure that they pay. Because if they don't pay at some point, then they would ultimately be revoked for not complying with the consent order. So yes, we keep them on here till they're done with their payment plan.
Okay. All right. That's all I have. This is a good report, and I'm glad we're doing this report now. It's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right, seeing none, we're going to move forward now to the legal report. This is an action item report. We're going to break it down via what we had sent out in the agenda to where we're going to do the consent agenda, which we have 8 cases today. We're also going to look at the proposed discipline, which we have 3. And we're also going to look at representations, which we have 3 there too. So we'll go through those. So everybody was sent an advanced agenda of the for the report, the legal report, and we're going to read from there. Last time we put more depth into this meeting and not to the next meeting tomorrow. So tomorrow I will emphasize more what the category is, what the recommendation is, and a little bit about the case, so that if somebody is getting on the line and not trying to get the 1-hour CPE, that they'll understand what is being reported there, and then when we vote, what we voted for. The first one is the category is acts discreditable, professional competency, contingent fee violations, and independence violations. The board received a formal complaint involving a former employee. The firm alleges that the respondent provided or attempted to provide services that were not known to the firm's partners or authorized by the partner group. It could be a breach of professional ethics standards. The respondent denied all the allegations, stating that she was fully transparent with the partners of the firm and the activities performed for clients. The matter was referred to an investigator for review. The matter was also discussed in more detail with the complainant, and evidence was collected from the firm. There is no evidence that the firm or respondent ever billed clients for services on a contingent basis. There is no evidence that the firm or the respondent ever billed clients for services on a contingent basis. And so there is no evidence that the respondent performed any services for clients outside her level of expertise. It is recommended to close this case. Any comments or questions? Okay, we'll go to number 2. The number 2 is dishonesty and acts of discreditability is a category. The board received an anonymous complaint against a respondent alleging unethical activity by the firm. The complaint alleges many issues that are internal firm matters not governed by the board law or rules. The respondent denied all allegations with the exception of one, and it involved a relationship, an inappropriate relationship with an employee. The complaint was forwarded to the investigator for review. In regard to allegations of dishonest and fraudulent activity by the firm, there is insufficient evidence to support the allegations, and the recommendation is to close. Any comments or questions? All right, number 3. Number 3 is an independence violation. The board received a copy of a newspaper article from an anonymous source informing the board that the respondent was completing non-attest services for an audit client. The respondent stated the newspaper article was inaccurate. While the firm completed consulting bookkeeping services for the client, the firm did not complete an annual audit for the client. The complaint was forwarded to the investigator for review. Since the client in question was a local government entity, and an investigator confirmed with the controller's office that the audit was completed by a firm other than the respondent, and the recommendation is to close. Any questions or comments? All right, number 4. Number 4 deals with the acts discreditable. Complainant filed a complaint against respondent alleging slander and defamation of character and that took place in a phone call between the parties. Respondent is a CPA and was hired by complainant's attorney to conduct evaluation of complainant's business as part of his divorce proceedings. In her response to the complaint, the respondent states that the complainant did not understand that the respondent was working for him. Once this was explained, the complainant formally withdrew the complaint. Allegations made, if accurate, would not rise to the level of an act that's credible or in violation of any board rule. And recommendation is to close. Any questions or comments? All right. Number 5, it's failure to exercise due professional care. Complainant filed a complaint against a respondent alleging tax dispute issue. Respondent is not enrolled a licensee of the board and does not hold himself out as a CPA, but as an enrolled agent with the IRS. A matter is outside the jurisdiction of the board. Recommendation is to close. Any questions or comments? All right. Number 6, holding out as a licensee. This one, the complaint is a licensed CPA in Georgia and Tennessee, and owns an LLC registered with the state of Georgia. Respondent held an active Tennessee CPA license from July 2011 to December 2015. Her license is currently in expired status. Complainant alleges that respondent was linked to her company's LinkedIn profile page in the people section as the owner of the business. Complainant deactivated her company page in order to remove the connection. According to the complainant also reached out to the Georgia Board of Accountancy. The Georgia Board of Accountancy was contacted and indicated that they had not received a complaint on the matter. Respondent states that she never intentionally linked her profile to the complainant's business. The respondent acknowledges that her old LinkedIn account may still be active, and that might be where the confusion lies. Respondent has a new LinkedIn and reached out to LinkedIn customer service in order to deactivate the old account. So the recommendation is to close. I'd say a lot of people have something like this happening in today's technology. So it's really something to watch out after. Number 7, or pardon me, any questions or comments on number 6? Okay, number 7. Case 7 is dealing with holding out as a licensee. The board initiated a complaint based on an anonymous notification via mail indicating that respondent claims to hold a license as a certified public accountant on her business Facebook page. A search of the board's files and accountancy license database did not reveal a CPA license in any jurisdiction under this name. Respondent apologized for falsification, indicating that she has been in the accounting field for years. However, she is not a CPA. Respondent noted that she has a social media manager that operates her social media and created her website. Respondent states that her business is tutoring company for math only, and she has not performed any accounting functions in her personal capacity or in her place of business. Respondent indicated that all language stating the CPA claim has been removed. A review of the respondent's online presence by an investigator and the board attorney confirmed the respondent is no longer holding out to the public as a CPA. And the recommendation here is to close with a letter of instruction. Any questions or comments? All right, number 8. Number 8 is dishonesty and objectivity. The board received a referral from the Tennessee Real Estate Commission, TREC, based on an anonymous complaint received from a member of the public. The respondent is licensed and affiliate broker with TREC and is also a CPA. According to the complaint, respondent was creating fake check stubs for his real estate clients to assist them in qualifying for home loans. Since this activity falls under his role as a CPA, TREC believed the Accountancy Board is in a better position to assess the merits of the complaint. The complaint provides no specific details surrounding the allegations, only that the allegations occurred. The respondent denies these allegations. The matter was referred to the investigator for review. After discussing the matter with the respondent, it appears the respondent has never provided accounting services for his real estate clients. However, it is possible that he has addressed tax questions on or completed tax returns for real estate clients in the past. The respondent provided a sworn statement he affirmed that he did not provide accounting or bookkeeping services to real estate clients. However, the statement is silent in regard to the profession of tax services to real estate clients. Due to this anonymous nature of the complaint and lack of details provided in the original complaint, it is not possible to review specific allegations for their legitimacy. Accordingly, there is no evidence to support the claims made. However, the respondent could face a conflict of interest for representing a client as both a tax preparer and a real estate agent if asked to provide supporting information to a lender for a loan. Recommendation here is to close with a letter of instruction.
Andy, I have a question on this one.
Yes, sir.
Actually, a couple of questions, and probably for Sherry, I guess. This is just a curiosity question, but I understand how creating false check stubs would help the person get a loan. I could understand false deposit slips, but not check stubs. And then number two, why was the affidavit or the sworn statement silent on the tax return question? Is that just because it doesn't apply, or what?
First of all, in terms of falsifying check stubs, I'm assuming that, again, we received nothing in the way of documentation on this or anything specifically. It was just a blanket statement to the real estate commission that said the respondent was doing this. There was absolutely no proof, and of course the respondent denied it, so there was nothing to look at to review that in terms of that particular question. Now, I could speculate that maybe those were W-2s or something that a lender may ask for to verify income, but I don't know definitively since even the complainant, who was anonymous, never provided that information to us. In terms of the second question about the sworn statement, when we put together the sworn statement, and it's very frequent that I will help a respondent prepare a sworn statement, so it's usually they have questions of what specifically do we want included in that. And when we addressed the issue, the respondent stated that he was comfortable stating that he didn't provide accounting and bookkeeping services, but he was not comfortable saying he did not provide tax services, meaning that it's possible that he did do a tax return for a client that was also a real estate agent. And when he gave us the final sworn statement, he simply did not include a statement related to any tax relationships with those clients. Does that answer your questions?
Well, yeah, I guess. It doesn't matter since we're not referring it for any further investigation anyway, but I still don't see how a check stub would help you get a loan.
A check stub probably would not help you get a loan, but I would agree with that. But, you know, obviously when you have a complaint that is anonymous that's referred to you, you can't ask the probing questions to find out if that's exactly what was provided or not. And of course, there's no evidence either. But there is definitely why we recommended a letter of instruction is there's definitely a potential for an ethical dilemma in this situation, since he is both providing real estate services to clients as well as he has the capability to provide tax services, and it is common for a lender to ask for tax returns. So that was why we were going the route with possibly, recommending a letter of instruction.
So in that letter of instruction, then we would recommend that he not do those types of things. Is that right?
Well, I would recommend that he takes the Code of Professional Conduct point of view, where you simply go through and identify where the risks are. Are there any safeguards? In fact, considering this person is a sole proprietor, I don't know what safeguards, he or she could put in, effect to overcome that, risk, so to speak. But again, normally you just go through that routine that the Code of Conduct, brings you through to assess and see if there's any way you can overcome that risk with appropriate safeguards to make it, to reduce that conflict of interest.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon, I'll kind of add that in the banking industry, it's very common to ask for the last 2 years' tax returns, but it's also very common to ask for the last 2 pay stubs.
That's true.
To ensure that you're still employed at the same place. And so, you know, it's where it would not be common to get a loan on a check stub. I have seen in our building where people do not get loans because they can't provide the check stub.
I would agree
They're
with
still
you.
employed.
I would agree with you.
So
Okay, you're talking, Andy, you're talking about check stubs where people wrote you a check. I thought it meant checks that he was writing. That's where my confusion was. I thought it was checks.
I interpreted it to be like the check stubs that, like Andy mentioned, sometimes if you apply for a car loan or for a home loan, they will ask for like the last 2 months to sort of verify, get some level of comfort. But it would be employer check stubs, or, you know, I guess if you were a 1099 employee, whoever your contractor is.
Okay, I understand.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a question. So, tell me again what he was doing. He was providing fake documents?
That was the allegation. That was the allegation, that he was providing fake documents so his real estate clients could qualify for loans from banks.
Okay,
or other
so
lenders.
why do we care whether he's providing tax services? He is a CPA. If he's providing people with false documents, then whether he's in business or not, I don't think totally wipes out the relevance of this complaint. I mean, that's a totally unethical thing to do in a business setting. And I would think it would be very relevant to the fact that he holds a CPA. Am I wrong?
Well, I would agree that if we had evidence to support the allegations, this would be a much more serious complaint that we would obviously not be looking at closing. But unfortunately, what was referred to us was simply a complaint with the statement. We did not have a complainant's name or contact information to reach out to receive additional information, and the respondent did not agree that he did that. So
there was no investigation except saying, "Did you do it?" And he said no. I mean,
more or less, yes. We did ask him, I asked him what types of services, if he ever provided any services for some of his real estate clients, and that's when we got into the discussion. No, I've never done accounting and bookkeeping. And I said, well, what about tax returns? And he said, well, that's possible. But again, we don't have any information to do any additional. This is the worst investigation you can get, is because it comes from an anonymous source, and then you're simply asking the questions to hopefully have the respondent provide you some information that might lean towards that. But in this case, nothing was provided that could definitively prove that that happened.
What if someone anonymously turned in somebody for embezzlement? What steps would we take?
Basically, we had one similar to this, I think, I think that was number 2 in this consent order agenda, where there was some allegations about a respondent taking money from a client. Now, what we can do in those cases is, particularly from the attorney end, is they can look for any litigation to show that, that has happened. But with an anonymous complaint with no details, there's not much more we can do in terms of, we can't say that a respondent is guilty of something if we don't have evidence to prove the respondent is guilty of something. Now, we can, and we often do, we'll look for any current litigation or past litigation that would actually prove that happened.
It just sounds like a very serious situation. And the write-up seems to me to emphasize more, well, he didn't do tax services. And I guess what we're saying is, if that's true, then he would not have had a way to do this other. But it almost sounds like we're saying, well, he's safe because he's not providing services to people, but he's holding a CPA. So I don't know what other steps.
I would say just the opposite, that the letter of instructions going along, because there's definitely a potential there for that conflict to happen because he is providing those services. That does add credence to the allegations that are made in the complaint. Unfortunately, it does not provide the level of evidence to actually move forward with anything other than a letter of instruction on this.
Well, I think you need to emphasize not just conflict of interest, but I mean, that's just, I mean, I assume it's illegal, but it's certainly
it's
totally
bank fraud. It's bank fraud. If it's accurate,
I mean,
it's bank fraud.
Huge. It's huge.
So, Sherry, if he intentionally left out the part that says I didn't do any tax returns for any of these people, doesn't that sort of imply that he thinks maybe he did? And so why wouldn't we say, well, can you go back and verify that and then add that to your sworn statement? Or if it's not true, then if it is true that you have, then do more work. But it seems like I kind of agree with Pam. I think we're kind of letting him off the hook by saying, no, I didn't do it, but maybe I might have done some tax work.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're stopping there. But is there not more we can do with that? No, I might have done some tax work. Is there not something more we can do there?
The only thing I can, and I'm going to actually defer to legal on this. Can we force him to put a statement in a sworn statement, an affidavit? Can we force a particular statement?
We can't force him, and I think that's where we run into the issue is that, just to echo what Sherry said, sometimes we get these complaints and people will submit, just no contact information for them, no reference to what the false stubs they're talking about, the client, any of that information. And I'm not saying this is the case, but just to kind of give you context, some people will submit complaints out of retaliation, or you don't always know the motivation behind. So I understand, like, on paper and looking at it, it seems very serious, but to what extent is an individual serious if they're not willing to participate and work with us in the investigation in order for us to actually find a violation? And so Sherry does a great job of being thorough, but we also can't request every single document ever, and do to find a violation. And so we have to work off of what we have. So to answer your question, we can't force a person to attest to something, but then in the absence of that attestation, you can't also conclude that the reverse of that is true, that he actually, just because you won't attest to it, that he actually did in fact have a conflict of interest, or there's several things that come to mind, that maybe he prepared tax a year that for someone when he wasn't representing him as a real estate agent. There's lots of different variables, I think, and that might be a reason he doesn't want to attest to that. So I guess my conclusion is, if we go back and said we want you to attest to that and he refuses, and this would proceed to formal hearing, and I just don't see how we would have evidence to prove that a conflict of interest actually does exist or did exist in the past, based off the fact that we have an anonymous complainant who said that this person creates fake checks. It's just not enough.
The only thing I'll add to that is I did go back through my notes while Maria was giving that explanation, and when we discussed this matter, basically how it was approached was, I've been providing tax services for the last 15 to 18 years. It is possible that I did a tax return for an individual that I also worked with as a real estate agent, but I don't recall. So that's why the respondent was very uncomfortable about putting in a statement, is that it's quite possible that I have done both services for the same individual at some point in time, but I could not, but the premise was, I've not done it for them concurrently, and maybe perhaps in hindsight what might have been better to do in the sworn statements to see if we could get a statement that said I did not do that for them concurrently.
Why would he only have provided fake check stubs for real estate clients who were also his accounting clients? Couldn't he have done it?
He could have done it for anybody, quite honestly.
Yeah, so I don't get why that's such a big assurance or such a big deal. To me, the question is, were you providing fake statements not, were you providing both types of services?
And I would agree if he did that.
Of interest.
Yeah, well, the reason we wanted to bring the conflict of interest is it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's a completely rare circumstance that you have a CPA and a real estate agent at the same time, but it is definitely not a frequent circumstance, and it does present unique ethical dilemmas that perhaps somebody in both fields might not be aware of. But I would agree, even if the individual provided a fake stub for somebody that was not a real estate client, it's still fraud. Absolutely, Pam, regardless.
Right. And I think the key here is that, we got somebody who anonymously made an allegation, and we don't have any facts whatsoever. We don't have a way to go back and test if they could have given us a name of a person or a bank where it was done at. They obviously had knowledge of this. And they didn't give us enough to go back and investigate it. And that's the problem when we get an anonymous tip or an allegation that something fraudulent's going on.
And we're not obligated to turn that complaint over to bank authorities or anything?
I don't, because my concern with this is that this is an anonymous situation that has accused someone, and supposedly people are innocent until proven guilty. And I don't think it's our responsibility to go out and try to prove an allegation that we have no support for, and prove someone in the profession is guilty of something just because someone said they are, who's anonymous and hasn't given any kind of support for the allegation. It's an allegation, it's not a fact.
Right. I just didn't know how far. I didn't know how far our investigation could or should go, and I didn't know if that would include turning this over to someone else who does have further reaching investigation. But anyway, I get it. I'm sympathetic to that point, but I didn't know how much we are supposed to do.
I guess I would think without some type of support, we would be venturing out into some area that we don't want to go. I'm not an attorney, Todd. You might want to speak to this, but I don't know that I'd want to go there.
Yeah, I think if we had evidence of wrongdoing, would give me stronger support on this instance to do something further. But based on what we do know, I don't know that any further obligation has been triggered for us.
The only other thing I can add to that too is that we do check for prior history of violations, and in this particular case, this individual has no enforcement activity and has held a license for a number of years. So, again, that doesn't definitively prove anything, but it does give us a feel for if there's been issues with the individual in the past.
Right. And I guess in the same opposite situation, I mean, I know of people who have been accused of something, and because of retaliation, they didn't do it, but I mean, people do that. So
I would say that happens here with the board. I mean, you can't definitively prove it's retaliation, but sometimes it feels like it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just have to know a situation where it was retaliation, and it can be a very slippery slope.
But let me ask two questions. First of all, do you think that we ought to put in there that the statement that you just made, Sherry, that that he indicated he'd been practiced for 15 years and he may have a long time ago, but not currently, and just put that statement, that's what he told you in our write-up? And secondly is, do we need to also put in the write-up that you did go back and check for any other complaints or allegations that may have been presented for this person?
I was going to say on point number 2, technically you see that in the bolded portion when it says history. If there had been any additional complaints, we would have seen that there would have been there in history. But in terms of adding that additional statement, I don't see a problem with that. Do you, Maria?
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. The other question would be just to the board itself and to the committee. do you think that we should emphasize tomorrow that if we have an anonymous tip or an anonymous complaint, that we definitely need evidence in order to, if they can submit some evidence to indicate what the complaint is, so that we can actually have it in hand or have a trail to go down to find where it might be, it's definitely helpful in these situations, so that if somebody is listening in that may have been an anonymous person, that they may stand back up and send us something that says, hey, yeah, I got some evidence, here it is.
I think that would be a great idea.
I think so too, and it could discourage people from bringing false accusations as well. I like that.
Okay.
Well, just as a follow-up, and then I'll hush too, just as a follow-up to what Pam said, though, the complaint, the way I read the complaint, it says that he was creating these false check stubs. I don't see anything in the complaint about performing accounting services, but yet the affidavit we had him signed said he didn't perform accounting services. Well, I don't even see that as part of the complaint. It was the creating of false check stubs that was the complaint. So I don't know what we accomplished by getting this affidavit.
Well, hey, there's also a statement in the sworn statement that says that he did not create the fake check stubs also.
So that's just, so I think we should add that in the,
okay.
If that's the case, I think we should add that.
Okay, I agree.
Andy, to your point, this is Kevin. I think that this could be a teachable moment, particularly tomorrow, where we can emphasize that if you're going to file a complaint, it's most helpful if there are actionable items and substantive details that can be investigated. And in the absence of that, it just makes everyone's job harder.
I agree.
Can I ask a question? Is there like a complaint? Well, I guess there's not a complaint form, where someone is making a complaint has to, give their name, contact information, that kind of thing. And I don't know if that's something that we need to have.
We do have one. If you file formally through the Board of Accountancy site, it does ask for details, and it also gives you a place to attach attachments to the complaint to document it as well.
So
if
maybe
they go through the form, and this is a real estate commission referral to us, so that made it also a little unusual from that end too, as it was not filed directly with the Board of Accountancy.
Yeah, maybe that's something that could be included, and the reference to the complaint form that exists on the website.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
People, can you all hear me?
Ahead. Yes, go ahead.
I was just going to say, a lot of people do in order to file an anonymous complaint, they'll just do Jane Doe I've even received a complaint that said their address was Nunya Business.
So that they remain anonymous.
They get really creative.
Right.
They want to remain anonymous. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I can understand that, but yeah, I guess it doesn't hurt to get as much information as we can. And if, like what Andy was saying, if they recognize that when you're anonymous, it makes it harder to investigate these types of situations, then that would be helpful.
Absolutely. And also just hopefully give you all some context. This is a very serious allegation, but we see a lot of complaints, and sometimes even the respondents will say, and at this point it's a he said, she said, but respondents will say, this person, we have these other issues going on, and they filed this in retaliation. And so it's not uncommon whatsoever. Right. That individuals do this. I'm not saying this happened in this case, but it is something to think about. That why would someone, if it was as serious as bank fraud and doing this kind of thing, why would they choose to remain anonymous, not contact, criminal authorities at that point? So just take all those other factors into consideration when we look at some of these that lack really important information.
Thank you, Maria, for that comment. Any other questions or comments? All right, seeing none, that concludes our consent agenda, cases number 1 through 8. At this moment, I would ask for a motion to approve the recommendations associated with cases 1 through 8?
Also move.
And second? Okay. All right, roll call.
Before we do the roll call, is that motion subject to the changes in number 8?
Yes, subject to, thank you. Subject to the changes for case number 8 that Sherry indicated that she would get changed. I assume we can get those tomorrow before the meeting. Okay, thank you, Marie. So I ask for that motion to be amended with that subsequent changes to number 8. Greg?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and a second again? Who seconded it?
My second still valid.
Okay. All right. Roll call, please.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pam Church.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
Todd Skelton.
Aye.
I think Stephen.
Typo. I'm not on this committee, I don't think.
Andy, I had him incorrectly on the agenda.
Okay. All right. I'll mark through. I put him up on the licensing, so I'll mark through this one here. Okay. All right. Now we'll go over to propose discipline. That's cases 9, 10, and 11. The first one deals with unlicensed activity and peer review violations. It's a referral from the Tennessee Board of Licensing and Contractors. There's no record of a permit of a peer review enrollment for the respondents' both businesses and that allow them to do this service. The respondent stated that her company was engaged to complete a review for a client that the client needed a quick turnaround on a balance sheet review. In the client's sense of urgency, respondent tried to assist the client with the review. Respondent indicates her company is primarily a tax company with a few bookkeeping clients. Respondent does not normally provide reviews or other attest work. Respondent was not aware that a firm permit or peer review was required to offer the service that was completed. The Tennessee Board of Licensed Contractors returned the review file back to the client and informed the respondent company was not permitted to complete the review. In this case, the recommendation is to authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's completion of the 2-hour ethics course and a payment of civil penalty in the amount of $750 in violation of Tennessee Board Accountancy rule. Any comments or questions? All right, number 10, unlicensed activity and peer review. Here again, the Tennessee Board of Licensed Contractors received a review report submitted by a respondent and requested license verification. The respondent does not hold a CPA license, firm permit, or peer review enrollment, which are required to perform this type of work. The board opened the complaint against the respondent. Respondent responded to legal counsel indicating that the review report was issued in error. Legal counsel requested further information detailing what happened and respondent did not respond. In this case, the recommendation is authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 in violation of Tennessee Board of Accountancy rules. Any comments or questions?
Kevin, I've got a question there. It's probably for Maria. It's why in number 9 are we doing a penalty of $750 and this 1,000? It seemed like they were very similar.
Yes, so in number 9, the respondent was very cooperative. They expressed that they had fully understood that now, this was a violation and that moving forward it wouldn't be done anymore. So they were just very cooperative, and I consider that to be a mitigating factor. And then in number 10, the respondent responded, said it was a mistake, and he never responded to me again. And so I just recommended the full penalty that we usually issue. But if you all feel differently, I'm fine to adjust either, but I do take into consideration cooperative respondents, and I consider that to be a mitigating factor.
Another thing in number 9, upon looking closer at that, the individual has not been under CPE requirements. That's why we added the ethics course, because it didn't appear she had ever had the ethics course. So we kind of added that in there to get her some education on what the requirements are.
So it's 750 plus the CPE course versus a.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All righty. Number 11, case number 11. This is an unlicensed activity and peer review. Here again, the Tennessee Board of Licensing Contractors received a complaint report submitted by the respondent and requested license verification. The respondent does not hold a CPA license, a firm permit, or a peer review enrollment, all of which are required to perform this type of work. Respondent asserted that he is not a licensed accountant and that his scope of work includes bookkeeping, payroll, and tax preparation. From the response, it appears the respondent did not have a good understanding of the nature of the complaint or the services limited to licensees in the state of Tennessee. It says, rather, he focused the use of the word accounting in his letterhead. He states that he has helped other clients and auto dealers, barbers, and other with licensing requirements in the past. However, he asserted that his scope of work for the aforementioned clients does not include test work. The recommendation is an authorize a formal hearing with the authority to settle via consent order upon the respondent's payment of the civil penalty in the amount of $1,000 in violation of Tennessee Board of Accountancy rule. Include a letter of instruction to respondent explaining that the compilation report is a test work and the test work can only be performed by licensees. Any comments or questions? All right. That concludes our proposed disciplines, which was 3 cases. And so do I have a motion to approve the proposed disciplines as recommended by legal counsel?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All righty. Roll call, please.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
Todd Skelton.
Aye.
All righty. Next, we have the re-representations. There's 3 cases associated with them. The first one is pretty plain spoken. It was a CPE deficiency. The respondent, the new information is that the respondent passed away in September 2019. So the new recommendation is to close that case. Any comments or questions? All right. Number 13 is fiscal dishonesty. A complaint was filed by the member of the Tennessee Board of Revenue or Department of Revenue, a special investigation team against the respondent. Respondent purchased an airplane on December the 5th, 2016 from a seller in Indiana. The purchase price of the airplane was $128,500 based on the information forwarded to Department of Revenue. A signed affidavit was received from the respondent on March 13, 2018, stating the purchase price of their airplane was $18,500. The respondent also included a falsified copy of the aircraft purchase agreement showing the same purchase price of $18,500, an aircraft security agreement, and a check for $1,375 for sales tax amount due. Due to the large discrepancy in the purchase price, Tennessee Department of Revenue referred the matter to a special investigator. After special investigation was completed, the department pursued a criminal case against the respondent in cooperation with the district attorney's office. The respondent entered a guilty plea and received a sentence of 1 year of supervised probation with sentencing deferred. The respondent did not deny the allegations of the complaint in his response to the board's complaint. The facts and circumstances of the complaint do support an act of fiscal dishonesty under Rule 20-4-.032B, which allows the board to take action against the licensee. Action by the board is also supported under Rule 20-4.032E, for failure to file impending the filing of a report required by federal or state law. The new information is the respondent requested an informal conference with legal and board member Trey Watkins to discuss the disciplinary action assessed against him in hopes of resolving this matter. This formal conference was held on January 27, 2020. At the conference, respondent admitted that his actions should not have occurred. However, his actions did not result in a criminal conviction, which has now been expunged from his record. Respondent argued that at no time was the public at harm or impacted by his actions. Respondent further argued that he is no longer in the practice of accountancy. Based on the informal conference discussions, respondent has recently offered a counteroffer, and our recommendation was to authorize a formal hearing with authority to settle via consent order for voluntary revocation and payment of a civil penalty in the amount of $2,000, and the board concurred with that. Respondent believes that the imposed disciplinary action is too harsh and not consistent with past actions of the issued by this board. Respondent restated his argument that his actions resulted in a criminal conviction that has been recently expunged from his record. Respondent proposes his license is placed in probationary status through December 31st, 2021, and there is an additional complaint issued by the board during this time period. The license would automatically be revoked. Respondent also proposes a $1,000 penalty and an additional 8 hours of continuing education in the area of ethics during the reporting period ending December 31st, 2021. The recommendation is recommended that the license be suspended through December 31st, 2021 in order to require respondent to appear before the board if reinstatement is pursued. And I don't know if legal would like to comment on this because a lot of things have been going on in this area. The question I have here was, what about the civil action and the fine related to it from that we had originally proposed, an amount of $2,000?
And I was at the meeting. Well, that's what they're proposing, is to drop that down to $1,000 civil penalty.
Is that this is Todd, is that the $1,000 counteroffer and CE hours is not included in the new recommendation? It's only the suspension. Does the recommendation include all three components?
The recommendation, well,
the new recommendation,
their offer,
sorry.
Yeah, the new recommendation includes the $1,000 penalty that they have proposed, and also the 8 hours of ethics CE. It includes that, but the only change that I would recommend is if we place in probationary status, then he can come back and get his license without having to appear before the board. So under the rules, if we suspend his license through December 31st, 2021, he must appear before the board in order to get reinstated. And then it's the $1,000 penalty and the 8 hours of continuing education. That's also included in the recommendation, but that's why I said we would discuss, the other issues should be discussed.
Stuart, this is Larry, Stuart. Going backwards a little bit, back to the original recommendation, legal had recommended the penalty plus taking the NASBA ethics course plus probation plus deferral to Texas. And our recommendation from the committee is just the fee. Just the penalty. Because the recommendation from legal and the board decision are totally different, much shorter.
Right. The recommendation is, all right.
I'm talking about the original
Okay,
recommendation.
the original was voluntary. Well, the original was our recommendation, which is on there, but the committee recommended a voluntary revocation plus the $2,000 civil penalty. Now they have counter-offered
They
for a
took out,
probationary.
so did the committee take out CPE and all that?
Yes.
Wonder why.
Well, it would be a revocation.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
They wouldn't need it.
Yeah, okay.
He complained that this action was too harsh as compared to other actions the board has taken. I assume that information was gathered. I mean, is there any validity to that complaint?
We didn't find any validity to that complaint. I mean, that's just their allegation, as it was too harsh. But I'd not go back to see if there was any type of, like some type of a same case scenario like this and what the board did in that situation.
Are we able to go back and
Go ahead.
Are we able to go back and see if this is consistent with prior practice of the board?
You know, Jan, this is Wendy. I don't know if we've had something this serious in the past 5 years that I recall for fiscal dishonesty and potentially fraud with the filing of the altering the documents. I just don't recall something that's similar in nature.
I'm glad.
It would be somewhat. Go ahead.
Just saying, I mean, I'm glad that this is not something that we've dealt with before, meaning that would be troublesome if this was recurring type thing. But I also do not recall us discussing a case like this since I've been on board.
I think we've had fraud on one's personal tax return, haven't we? This is similar, but to me it's more severe because they actually altered the document. But that's what comes to my mind that we've seen that's somewhat similar is when a CPA in filing his or her own tax return has committed fraud.
Yeah, it seems like that's something, not exactly this, of course, but somewhat similar. It could have been that in the prior cases, the situation may have been subject to some other judicial kind of review or litigation, but seems like we've had something somewhat similar.
Ben, I'd just like to add, I mean, if they say it's too harsh, that doesn't mean it is too harsh, because it's certainly within the jurisdiction of the board to go anywhere from probationary to revocation. So for them to claim that it's too harsh, that's why I didn't give it too much weight in my recommendation. The only thing I was worried about is if they want probation, then they don't have to come before the board. And I think in this situation that it's serious enough that they do need to come before the board if they want to get reinstated, which at this point, they say they're not going to get reinstated, that they're not going to practice in the field of accountancy. However, we don't know that, but if we don't do something that's a little bit more like suspension, then they can come back and get reinstated without appearing for the board, and it would be a lot easier for them to do that.
This is Kevin. In my experience, just going back over the last several years, I think the board has consistently treated these types of indiscretions that involve fraud or falsification more seriously than others. And even though he may say it's been expunged from his criminal record, the fact is he admitted to a criminal violation and he was subject to discipline for that. And I'm not sure that the board's original agreed upon punishment was overly harsh at all. But I definitely am supportive of the notion that he needs to appear before the board, or he ought to appear before the board if he wants to be reinstated. And if it's a matter of a difference of between $1,000 or $2,000 in terms of settling or having a hearing, I'm ambivalent about that, but I definitely think there should be a revocation if we're going to, deviate from our original approved disciplinary recommendation.
I guess for me, my main concern would be that we are consistent in treatment, and I guess as long as we are being consistent in how we're treating these types of situations, and I do agree that I think it would be good that this person would have to appear before the board. And I'm assuming if once the person comes out of probation, then they could just go back to practice and nothing ever comes back before the board. Is that correct?
Well, they are out of probation. That's why it's been expunged. So basically, there's no record of this on that person's record.
No, I mean his CPA license, if it were in a probationary status, and once that probation of the
correct. Sorry about that.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I think it should come before the board, and that we should be consistent in how we're treating the situation.
So let me clarify. The individual has active status right now. If the board were to decide to place the license on probation, unless you set restrictions, that doesn't prohibit the individual's use of the CPA designation or practicing at all. So probation is really just a title unless you add something to it. A suspension requires the individual to renew and complete CPE, but they are not entitled to use the designation during the suspension until the board, until they appear before the board and get their license back.
So I thought this new recommendation is suspension.
It is.
That is our recommendation after they suggested probation.
Yeah, I'm not worried about his suggestion. I think we should, I like Stewart or I guess all the legal eagles who are recommended. I think suspension is more appropriate. I mean, this guy basically lied big time and fraudulently and committed fraud.
Mm-hmm. We have a case before us tomorrow, this is John, of reinstating a 5-year revocation with a $5,000 penalty for misappropriating money from a lacrosse club. And I don't see where this is in any way harsher than something like that. This person attempted to steal money from the state to the order of $6,000 or $7,000 and falsified documents. So I'd have a hard time arguing that this is more harsh than some other things out there.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, I think we probably need to work on the recommendation at the bottom of page 11. So in this case, it says it's recommended the license be suspended. I think everybody's kind of going down that road through December 31st, 2021, in order to require a respondent to appear before the board and if reinstatement is pursued. Also, if we're going to put a penalty in there, I think that it was kind of implied that we should stay at the $2,000 civil penalty. Thus, that should be stated in there. And then if we're going to require some type of continuing education in the area of ethics, I think that should probably be stated in that new recommendation. Any comments or questions with those changes?
Is that going back to what John just said? Do you think the 2,000 is enough for a penalty?
I think it would be inappropriate to raise it above the 2,000 at this point.
Think it would be or not?
It would be, since that's what we've already stated.
Wendy,
But I'll let legal tell me.
I believe that the recommendation that legal would make would be the suspension through 2021, either $1,000 or $2,000 civil penalty and the 8 hours of ethics.
Janet, Pam, Greg,
Todd? Andy, on behalf of the committee, I'd like to put that in the form of a motion that we change the recommendation as Stuart indicated, so that we do the suspension, the $2,000 penalty, the course that we recommended initially.
I think we just recommended an additional 8 hours of continuing education in the area of ethics.
I'm just updating the legal report. I want to be clear. So that's different from the 3-part NASBA ethics course.
I'm
8 hours.
Wendy, do you know?
Yeah, the 3-part ethics course, if that's what you would like the individual to do, I would specify that. If you want 8 hours of CP and ethics and give them an opportunity to go find that somewhere, then we should state it that way. So whichever one you all want. I think the AI or the NASBA course is a good overall ethics course geared towards CPAs.
I think the question is, we don't know how many hours that is. Is that 3 hours or do you know?
Correct. I don't know how many hours that equates to.
This is Kevin. I would offer up, since that's the course that we had specified in our original approved discipline, I would say it might be easier just to continue with that same recommendation and not further complicate things.
Yes. The original recommendation was the 3-part NASBA ethics course within 30 days of signing the consent order.
Okay. So, Greg, do you want to put that in a motion?
Yes, sir.
All right. Second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Seeing none,
can we clarify? So this is suspension, $2,000 penalty, and the NASBA 3-part course.
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks.
I just sent in the chat what I have written right now, if that is helpful.
For me, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, so I think Maria was saying that she had put in chat the written form of the motion, but because this is a video call, I'm going to go ahead and read that recommendation so it'll be available for public audience participation. It is recommended that the license be suspended through December 31, 2021 in order to require the respondent to appear before the board if reinstatement is pursued. Require respondent to pay $2,000 civil penalty, and says it's also recommended, but I think really this would be a requirement that the respondent complete the 3-part NASBA ethics course within 30 days.
Is there magic to 30 days? I agree, let's make it a requirement, but I don't know that time period necessarily matters, given that they've got a year to do this.
I would say that's a good point, Todd, and maybe we could say prior to December 31st, 2021, which is consistent with the suspension date.
I'm agreeable to that.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, so I'll ask Greg to withdraw his motion.
I will withdraw or amend the motion to change the date to December 31st, 2021.
All right, in a second.
And also change recommended to required.
All right.
And I'll second that.
All right. Any other further discussion on the motion? All right. Roll call, please.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Gilbert.
Aye.
Todd Skelton.
Aye.
All right. We've got the last one is case number 14. It's objectivity and client confidentiality. In the complaint is alleged the respondent was unethical in representing her husband as an expert witness in the divorce case. Respondent previously represented complainant in estate planning and other business activities in 2013. Respondent apparently was engaged to handle complainant's business, financial review, tax returns, and personal tax returns in the past from 2013 to 2015. Complainant's counsel filed a motion in court that alleges failure of unethical and confidentiality rules. Complainant says that respondent is utilizing a report and information that was generated under an engagement that included complainant. Case is involved at that point was pending, and so we put it into place of monitoring status. The new information is the complainant filed this complaint based on a motion to disqualify husband's expert witness in a divorce case. The complainant alleges the expert submission to the court was utilizing a 2013 calculation report and information that included complainant since the parties filed a joint tax return through respondent in 2013. Since complainant was part of a joint tax filing, she claims she would be considered a client of respondent. The expert was employed by the respondent at the time of the joint return filing. Complainant claims expert is violating ethically and confidentiality rules because a waiver of client confidentiality for the personal joint tax returns was never signed by complainant nor used and the information was authorized. Respondent denies any conflict or ethical violation since the expert utilized information that was not outside of discovery and therefore not confidential. Further, the information used for the expert's report was based on discovery documents of the husband's corporation. The complainant is not associated. The report submitted was a current violation or a current valuation of the corporation and did not include any information regarding joint tax returns. The respondent points out that the complainant may have supplied all the information in 2013 for a financial review of the corporation, but supplying information does not give rise to conflict or confidentiality violations issues on the experts or themselves. Husband and sole owner authorized the release of the information for the expert's current valuation of the corporation. Legal reached out to the complainant and her attorney requesting court ruling concerning the motion to disqualify based on the allegations. Complainant explained the motion was heard and the judge held a decision for trial. The parties reached an agreement before trial, so there was never a ruling from the court as to whether the expert agreement before trial, so that the ruling from the court as to whether the expert should be disqualified based on conflict of interest or release confidentiality of information without waiver or authorization. Plaintiff further requested the complaint be closed since all parties reached an agreement. And the new recommendation is to close the case. Any comments or questions? All right, the last one is under peer review, number 15. The respondent's firm was dropped from the TSCPA peer review in 2017. For TSCPA, the last peer review completed was in 2012. According to respondent on peer review renewal, respondent indicated it continued to provide audit services through 2015. Respondent admitted to dropping peer review, but thought since completed in 2012, they would be covered through 2015. Respondent admitted to performing audits through 2015. No evidence indicating respondent has completed audits after 2015. The new information is that due to lack of communication from the respondent, this case was set for formal hearing on October 20th, 2020. The respondent has since been in communication with the board attorneys and provided evidence of extenuating medical circumstances that started in 2015. Respondent's doctor indicated that she was unable to respond to the board communication during this time due to her medical condition. Respondent's license expired on December the 31st, 2018. Respondent sold the firm in 2017, which that license expired on December 31st, 2017. Respondent is no longer in practice of accounting and currently caring for her mother. The new recommendation is due to the extenuating medical circumstances. It's recommended that respondent agree to a consent order without civil penalty. Any comments or questions?
I was just wondering, does the respondent intend to practice again, or do we know?
I've spoken with her, Janet, a good bit. She said at this time she's not anticipating on practicing.
Ever?
She just, I didn't say ever, or yeah, for eternity. She just said at this time she's not anticipating practicing. And that is something we have worked extensively on this case. And so that's something we discussed with Wendy too, is that we want the consent order so that she does acknowledge that there was a violation that occurred. However, just because of her extensive medical history, we thought it was appropriate to remove the civil penalty. So we will get something in writing from respondent indicating that there was a lapse in peer review, and just an admission of what happened, but also include the fact that there were extenuating circumstances. So we thought that was a good balance for this particular situation.
Yeah, and I guess, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I guess I'm just wondering if the person ever wanted to or started practicing again, then what would prevent the same condition from happening again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, that's something I thought about, but it's also something we really can't control just because it's so relative to each individual. But I think it will be helpful that we have something on record stating that this has happened in the past and how we dealt with it.
Any other questions?
How do we, I guess I'd ask specific to this, but also generally for precedent, extenuating medical circumstances that excuse years of behavior and kind of lack of response. I struggle with what precedent that sets if you're just asking for if you can get a doctor's note to excuse that and escape something that generally would not escape penalty from this board. And I realize that this individual has experienced some hardship and, now is caring for what I imagine is an ill family member. But it just is a little questionable to me.
Mm-hmm. I understand. This was something that the individual, we have several doctor's notes and visits, and it just seemed, and I'm happy to share those. I just don't think it's something that we should discuss on public record. But if more detail is needed, I just want to respect the respondent. And it's just one of the cases that I knew if it came before the board, you all would say, have mercy on this poor woman. Like, she's been through a lot. And so, I guess it's just something that I'm asking you all to trust legal counsel, that we have evaluated it and ensured that it's legitimate. And so, but if there's a different direction, I understand that. But this particular individual did go through a good bit of hardship during that time, and we just have signed several time doctor's notes. I think it's sufficient. I do think it's a judgment call, Todd, and I understand what you're saying, but I feel really good about this recommendation and confident that it's the right path. So.
I have confidence in your review of the record, and I obviously don't want to violate someone's privacy rights on a WebEx call, but just wanted to air that thought. So I'm fine proceeding.
Thank you.
I just want to be clear that, so this person, and I don't have an issue with, your recommendation, and except for clarifying that this person can just come back and start practicing in the same way in the future at any time. Is that how this will work?
Yes, that is correct.
I kind of disagree with that part.
Yeah, just want to follow up on that. So the background says she sold her firm. So I'm presuming she's an individual licensee, and if she wants to practice and at least do a test work, she's going to need a firm permit, and she would need to apply for that, right?
Yeah.
And so at that point, we would have a chance to look at that application and review it, and make a decision.
I don't know, it wouldn't be something that it would come before the board, but if you'd like, we can flag the license so that, and we could put that in the consent order that, that she does. You can do whatever you want in the consent order. We can have her appear before the board.
I think that's a good recommendation.
Yeah, I think we need to do something rather than the person just being able to go back and either apply for a firm permit if they're doing a test work, or if they're doing other type of work as a CPA and holding themselves out as a CPA without doing anything. So yeah, if we can flag it, or if there's some way to kind of keep some alert on it.
Yeah, I think it's best that we
I can add that as well.
We flag the license, and then we'll also have the consent order on file, so y'all be able to look at that if she does decide to reapply.
So does that mean that the consent order would say, provided she wants to reactivate her license or reinstate, because I think she's expired, that she'd be required to come before the board? Is that, Maria, is that how you're understanding the request?
Yeah,
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to amend that recommendation to include that the respondent agreed to a consent order with it written in that they agreed to come before the board before acquiring a firm permit.
Is that going to be for her individual license, Andy, or the way I have it is for her individual license? So that's who the complaint is against. But
Well, wouldn't she have to? She wouldn't be able to. She'd have to have a firm permit, though, right? So if we're going to do it for one, should we not do it for both?
Yeah, I think for both.
Well, at this point, her individual license exists, but her firm permit doesn't exist because she sold the firm. So I don't know if we couldn't flag that, but we can flag her individual. Is that Wendy on the licensing side? Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, because if she opens another firm, it would not be under the same name. She would have to apply for a brand new firm permit. And I don't think we can put stipulations on initial licenses. Is that correct?
Yes, because at this point that doesn't exist. But she will have to reactivate or reinstate her individual license before she's able to move forward. So something
correct.
That we'll be aware of.
Okay.
So then flag her individual license and require her to come before the board. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Any other?
Do you all want the language to? Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to make one point of clarification. Do you all want it to? Do you only want her to come before the board if she's pursuing a firm permit? Or do you want her to come before the board if she's reinstating her individual? Because I can make the language to where it's only if she wants to then open a firm permit to do a test work. Or I can just make it a blanket statement that if she wants to pursue her individual license again, that she needs to come before the board.
I would say that we could get her to come for a board for her individual license permit, that would be sufficient. What about the rest of the committee?
I'm not on the committee, but if she can't get the individual, she can't get the firm anyway. So
right.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as that's the case, yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Right. So I will ask for a motion with that changed language added to it, that she comes before the board if she reinstates her license.
So moved.
The second.
Second.
All right, roll call, please.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Greg Gilbert.
Aye.
Todd Skelton.
You're muted, Todd.
I think you're on mute, Todd.
Aye.
Go ahead. Okay.
Thanks.
So that was number 15. What I failed to do is include now the re-representations 12, 13, and 14. We need to go back and make a motion to accept the recommendations and the amended recommendation on case number 14. It's sent out in the chat, and I'll read it out. That we voted on to say it's recommended that the license be suspended through December 31st, 2021 in order to require a respondent to appear before the board if reinstatement is pursued. Requiring a respondent to pay $2,000 civil penalty. It is also recommended that the respondent complete every part in the ethics course before 2021, December 31st, 2021, not 30 days, as we changed that. Well, I ask for a motion to accept the recommendations on 12 and 13 and the amended recommendation on 14.
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Andy Bonner.
Aye.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Pamela Church.
Aye.
Bert.
Aye.
Todd Skelton.
Aye.
All right. Well, thank you, committee members. Mr. Chairman, I think that concludes a legal report.
Okay, thank you, Andy. And again, another heavy lifting job on the part of you and your committee. So thank you for working through those cases. And also thanks to Wendy and the investigative staff, as well as the legal counsel staff who did a lot of behind the scenes work to prepare the report and to get us where we could have some good fact-based discussions there. I'm showing it's about 8:35. I would recommend if the board is amenable that we take a 10-minute break and we reconvene at 8:45. And that while you're on break, just make sure you mute your microphone and probably stop your video here, and then pick those things back up when we come back from break at 3:45 p.m.
From TSCPA could go ahead and make the presentation since we're running a little late.
That would be just fine, Wendy. We'll go ahead and proceed to the executive committee. Larry, if you're okay with that, and that way that the TSCPA folks can give their presentation, and then we can proceed.
And unless they're not ready yet, but just a suggestion.
I think we're ready, Andy.
We don't want to put Brad on overtime.
I'm just here to listen to Richard Hill and Katie Cheek give an update, see what they're saying, make sure they're accurate.
All right, we will go ahead and do that, and so we'll turn the floor over for the peer review update to our fine representatives from the TSCPA.
All right, I'm going to try to share my screen real quick. We prepared some PowerPoint slides for you all to see. Can you see those? Can y'all hear? You can see those? Okay.
Yes.
So thank you for having us today. We're pleased to be here to share an update on the peer review program. Wendy, we've got Kara on the phone, as well as Richard Hill, who is our TSCPA Peer Review Committee Chair, and then Art Sparks, who is the program's technical reviewer. So they may be chiming in too as well as I go through these presentation slides. And if any of you guys have questions, feel free to jump in and ask. I'm going to go ahead and start with an update on our enrollment information. Are my slides advancing for y'all? Can y'all see those? Okay. So currently we have about 598 firms enrolled in the program. As you can see, this is a little bit of a decline from last year. And the trend is that year over year, we do see a little bit of a decline. If you're looking over the last 10 years or so, you can see where our enrollment numbers peaked back in 2010 when TSCPA took over the state board's peer review program. And since then, those numbers have gotten a little bit smaller every year. Typically, the reason we see that number shrink is either due to firms no longer performing work subject to peer review, which was especially common after SARS-21. And then here lately, we see a lot more firms who are getting out of peer review because they've either sold their firm, they're retired, or merging in with another firm. Looking a little bit at our peer review report data, I've pulled information from the last 2 years. So this shows you for 2019, we accepted 122 reviews with a 69% pass rate, 15% fail rate, and 16% pass with deficiency rate. The numbers look similar for this year. Of course, we've seen fewer reviews come through the pipeline, and I'll talk about that more here in just a moment. But overall, the percentages are really close to what they were last year. So anytime a firm receives a non-pass report on their peer review, our peer review committee takes a look at the details and the circumstances surrounding the peer review and puts together a corrective action plan that is designed to remediate the issues identified during the review. So you can see it's fairly common that the committee will issue CPE, and that will be specific CPE that's designed to remediate the issues found during the review. And then post and pre-issuance reviews are also fairly common. And when that happens, the peer review committee requires that a firm engage an outside party approved by the committee to perform a pre or a post-issuance review of that engagement. So that means that whoever's performing that corrective action review must be belonging to a firm that's also enrolled in the peer review program that has a pass report. Do you have any questions on that so far? I'll talk a little bit about COVID-19 and the impacts on the program. As you probably heard earlier this year, the AICPA granted an automatic 6-month extension to all enrolled firms who had original peer review due dates falling between January 1st and September 30th. So this kind of created a little bit fewer reviews coming through the pipeline this year, since many of our firms now have peer reviews due at the end of the year or the first part of next year. Approximately 150 or so firms fell into this extension category. For firms who had peer review due dates falling after September 30th, they did not receive an automatic extension. However, the AICPA has given administering entities guidance and that we should continue to offer some flexibility in granting extension requests. So our peer review committee does have an extension policy they're prepared to follow, but also to offer some flexibility as needed when extension requests come in. Like I mentioned, this extension request has resulted in a larger number of firms with reviews due later this year and at the first of next year. TSCPA has been proactive in reaching out to firms to encourage them to go ahead and schedule their peer review and try to stick to their original peer review cycle as closely as possible, just to avoid any issues with scheduling the review later, since peer reviewers are dealing with issues at their own firms, and they'll be dealing with many firms trying to have a peer review all at one time. So we've sent out emails and tried to be proactive in encouraging firms to stick to that regular deadline. We are prepared to accept peer reviews in a higher volume at the end of this year and the start of next year. We don't anticipate any issues with the acceptance process going beyond the 120 days that we're allowed once a peer review is completed. So I don't anticipate you guys seeing any issues with that. Just to kind of take a look at where we are as far as the extensions granted and where firms are kind of falling and whether or not they're taking advantage of the extension. You can see here the original due dates for firms next to the extended due dates and then the percentage and number of reviews outstanding. So the majority do seem to be taking full advantage of that extension that's been granted. Currently, overall, about 74% of that 150 firms who received an extension appear to be using that extension, and that turns out to be about 93 of those 150 firms. This was as of just a couple of days ago when I ran this information. Does anybody have questions there? Additional COVID-19 impacts. The AICPA has waived the requirement that firms and their reviewers obtain written permission to perform a system review off-site. This is something the AICPA peer review board may be looking at permanently discontinuing, and that's just out of, with the travel restrictions and restrictions on meeting in person, it's something that the peer review board did not feel was completely necessary in light of COVID. I'm going to touch a little bit on the firm non-cooperation process. We've been over this before with the board, but it's been a couple of years, so I thought a refresher might be helpful. When a firm doesn't cooperate with the program, there's a couple of things that can happen. If a firm fails to cooperate prior to the commencement of a peer review, they are dropped from the program. And that terminology that we use is the word dropped. And that is specific, again, to instances that occur prior to a peer review commencing, such as failure to schedule a peer review, failure to pay an administrative fee, failure to respond to inquiries prior to the review. And anytime that happens, TSCPA does notify the board. We usually email Karen when a firm is dropped so that she's aware of that. In addition to that notification, the board is also able to pull information out of the facilitated state board access online portal. Slightly different from a drop is a termination. This is the terminology we use if a firm is terminated from the program, and that is after a peer review has commenced. So in this situation, the peer review has started, and it may be that the firm has stopped cooperating for whatever reason. So maybe they don't respond to a matter or a finding identified during the review. Maybe they complete their corrective action. Maybe they just stop responding to their peer reviewer. And in this case, the TSCPA peer review committee gathers evidence together, reviews that evidence, and votes on whether or not to refer the firm to the AICPA. Once the firm is referred to the AICPA, the peer review board may decide to hold a panel to determine whether or not the firm has been cooperative. And if they determine that the firm has not cooperated, they may vote to terminate that firm. If a firm is terminated, there's a couple of instances where they specifically are required to go through the peer review board at the AICPA in order to be reinstated. And this can be somewhat of a time process. It can take a little bit for a firm to go through these steps. So these specific situations where they have to go through the AICPA board would include if a firm was terminated due to consecutive non-pass peer review reports, or if the firm was terminated for failure to correct deficiencies or significant deficiencies after consecutive corrective actions on the same peer review. Any other reasons for termination, the firm may come through the TSCPA to reinstate their enrollment. And anytime a firm is terminated or reinstated into the program, we will notify the state board. Kind of a snapshot of our drops and terminations. As you can see, terminations are not especially common. We've only had 3 of those over the last couple of years, and I've listed those reasons for termination here. Drops are a little bit more common. We've had 54 of those the last couple of years, and again, the most common reason tends to be failure to schedule a review. Any questions for me? At this point, I think Richard is going to take over and talk a little bit about our oversight programs.
I am. Good afternoon. I'm still a member of the Oversight Task Force where I was on as a board member, but I've stayed on as a former board member, but a member of the Oversight Task Force. That's a group of the peer review board charged with overseeing the administration of the peer review program throughout the country. Art Sparks is also a current member of that Oversight Task Force as well as a peer review board member. So I want to just talk briefly about a couple of the oversight initiatives at AICPA. The first slide up is RAB observations. This process has been in place since about 2013 or 14. So we've had 3 of our 16 meetings observed by an AICPA staff member, an oversight task force member. And so they're looking to see if we're following the standards and assigning the right corrective actions. And are we following our familiarity policy? Are we treating committee members and high volume reviewers the same as everybody else? And are the reviews being presented timely to the committee, being acted on timely? So as a result of those 3 observations, we've had no really critical comments. They didn't disagree with a report rating or how the RAB handled anything. I think they had one minor documentation question on one of the visits. That's pretty typical of what we see nationwide. I sit on the group that oversees and accepts all those RAB observation reports. And I'm very pleased that throughout the country, the report acceptance bodies are doing a very good job fulfilling their responsibilities for accepting these reviews. So there's nothing really major to come out of those observations. That's not like it was when it first launched, but that's another story for another day. We don't have a slide about this, but want to mention enhanced oversight just very briefly. When we met with the board a couple of years ago, I told you about that program where the work papers on a peer review are sent after the review's done. It goes to a subject matter expert. They go behind the peer reviewer to see if the peer reviewer's caught all the instances of nonconformity. And that program is going very, very well, so that all the training and the feedback and all the tools that we've applied have really raised the performance of the peer reviews. Peer reviewers are doing a much better job than they were several years ago. So that shows that program is being very effective. Consideration of the pandemic, the peer review board, the oversight task force kind of parked this enhanced oversight program for the rest of 2020, just to give the firms a break and one less thing to have to deal with through all these times. The next slide talks about benchmark reporting. We touched on this when we met with you back in January of 19. That's a new initiative of the AICPA to make sure that we're administering entities, all of them, are following certain benchmarks. I flipped 2 pages, I apologize. Administrative oversights. We'll talk about benchmarks in a minute. Next Tuesday and Wednesday, we're having our biannual administrative oversight. Tom Perry, an oversight task force member, former peer review board chair, will be doing that oversight. It'll be done remotely like all of them have been done in 2020. But he's still doing all the same procedures as he would do if he were sitting in Brentwood at the TSCPA office. So that's an oversight of the administrative procedures, the technical review procedures. He'll observe the committee and how we function in our annual meeting. Then he'll issue a report generally within 30 days of that visit. That also has to go through and be approved by the Oversight Task Force. And once that's available, it'll be posted on the TSCPA website as well as the AICPA website. We haven't had any comments in a number of years, but the trend throughout the country is a comment or two on something, again, documentation-wise, you're not accepting reports properly or not administering the program properly. So I would anticipate something like that. We'll know at the end of next Wednesday what his report will read like. In the next slide, apparently I flipped 2 pages. Let's talk about benchmarks. So task force of the peer review board launched this benchmark reporting several years ago. It's been in an extended pilot phase just to make sure that it's accurate and that we're measuring the right things and holding people to a proper account. Katie and Kara on the call and are far too modest to tell you this, so I'll tell you for their behalf. But Tennessee is one of 4 administering entities who are very deeply involved in establishing these benchmarks and the measurements and what's fair and what should we expect. And so that's benefited Tennessee 2 ways. One, is that we had input into defining those benchmarks and how they're going to be measured. And the other thing is we kind of got some advanced preview of what these were going to be. So those are now required. Initially, they were required 4 times a year, and that group that oversees that decided that it would be okay to do them 3 times a year because that information is pretty consistent. So our report, I think, is due October 31st, if I remember right. Once again, it's not unusual to have a no answer on these. I think we're doing very well with that. A no answer is just simply a no answer on one benchmark report. And when this was launched, meaning a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, maybe, we came up with fair procedures. So what if you had an AE that just administering entity like the TSCPA? What if you had an AE that just wasn't doing it correctly? We wanted to have a mechanism to help them remediate or to help them transition the program to another AE who would do it right. There has been nothing anywhere close to coming to that level from any administering entity in the country, but we did have to have those procedures in place, somewhat to have a, I'll say stick, that sounds pretty harsh, but just so they know we're taking this seriously and they need to comply with the benchmarks that are out there. So, so far the reporting has come out, I think it's gone very well, especially in Tennessee, but throughout the country. So again, I would expect every now and then there'll be no answers, especially through the pandemic. But that group that oversees that is certainly mindful of all that. Lastly, on the final slide, I want to talk just briefly about familiarity. My good friend Art Sparks that's on this call and I have had discussions for about 3 years now on what is familiarity. So there's a good kind of familiarity that if you know a reviewer struggles in a certain area, if you're the technical reviewer, if you're a committee member looking at that review, you maybe have heightened skepticism about that. Anytime you see familiarity in peer review board terminology, it's bad familiarity. It's where a committee is not willing to push back against a committee member or a high volume reviewer or something like that. So last 2 or 3 years, every administering entity, every committee has been required to develop a familiarity policy and to implement that. And so I think ours in Tennessee is one of the better ones that I've seen. We've got some things in there that I think are unique to Tennessee. Since we met back in January of 19, we've changed our RAB structure and no longer are those geographic based RABs, East, Middle, West. We mix them up so you're sitting in a committee meeting with different people each meeting. We sometimes will bring in someone from outside the state that would clearly have no connection with any firm. Just, I think the board knows this, but if you have a conflict, you can't act on that review. You can't do the technical review on it. That's prohibited by the standards. But if you think you have a familiarity conflict, then you should step aside for that. We are revising that policy at our meeting next week. We'll adopt it. We'll tighten it up even more. And we continue to be mindful of that. But once again, I think Tennessee's got one of the better policies out there. And I attribute that to Kara and Katie's involvement at a national level that's making sure Tennessee is at the top of the list when it comes to developing this guidance. Like anything else, we're starting with a blank slate, so we're kind of writing it from scratch, but it is evolving, and I'm pleased with where it's at. One thing that's interesting as part of that is where, as well as our oversight policy, but to tell you how not familiar the TSCPA peer review committee functions, we passed last year that the peer review committee chair must be oversighted at least once during the term of being the chair. And so the purpose of that is to make sure that there's no differential treatment to the committee chair. I take it to be just one more reward for volunteering your time. But I credit Katie and Kara for coming up with that, but the committee endorsed it wholeheartedly, as I did as chair. I think that's the right answer, and I'm not aware of another state that has that particular oversight policy in place. So bear in mind, when we're talking about familiarity, the reviewer sends it in to a technical reviewer that's independent. Then it goes to at least 4 committee members that must act on it. So there are a lot of different sets of eyes on a review before it gets accepted. And Art has guided us in his time as tech reviewer to hold committee members actually to a higher standard. And so I think we actually do that and do a good job with it. So that's a little bit about oversight, a little bit about familiarity. I'd be happy to answer any questions from anyone.
Richard and Katie, this is Kevin. One question for you all, and this is an issue that the board has intermittently dealt with. Sometimes we'll see some indications that firms are enrolling for peer review, and basically saying that they're enrolled in peer review, and then they will, I guess to use the current terminology, drop, prior to the commencement of their peer review. And there's some potential there for some gamesmanship that's going on in terms of claiming enrollment for peer review and then not really following through. Is that something that you're seeing substantial activity in, or do you believe that's really fairly rare based on your observations?
I don't think we have any more drops now than what we've seen in the past. You will tend to see some of the same firms who get dropped for something like failure to schedule a review or failure to pay a fee. Kind of seems to be the same repeat offenders. In order for those firms to come back into the program, they have to do whatever it was that they failed to do that resulted in the drop. So in order for them to come back, they would have to pay the fee that they didn't pay before, plus a reinstatement fee, or they would have to schedule to have their peer review before we would let them back in, which would, hopefully, the intention is to put them back into the cycle where they are completing a peer review. So that's typically how we would handle those. Does that help?
Yes, thanks, Katie.
Okay.
And Kevin, if I might, you cannot drop out of peer review once the peer review process is started. You can't get in the middle of a peer review and things not be going well and drop out. You have to complete the peer review, which means getting probably a non-pass report and jumping through all the hoops that we have you jump through for corrective actions or implementation plans.
Right. I appreciated the distinction also, Art, that was made in the slides between dropping and termination.
Right.
That was informative. Any other questions for Katie or Richard or Art?
So let me throw in one more thing. So if they enrolled, Katie, correct me, I think they've got 18 months, but they have to have their review completed. So and if they don't, then there's this drop or termination process if they hadn't scheduled their peer review. So they might get game it for a year or a few months, but I'd almost wonder if they're not telling you they're enrolled, but they really haven't gone through the formality of enrolling. I don't know. I don't know how much more information.
I would add to that too, that if a firm is dropped for failure to schedule a review and they get off of their peer review cycle. So for example, if they were due to have a review by September 30th of 2020, they didn't schedule the review, they were dropped. When they come back in, they only have 90 days to complete a peer review. So if they don't complete their peer review within 90 days, they would be dropped again. And when that happens, the state board is notified. So that would be on your records at that point.
And one of the other kind of areas of progress that's been being made is greater notification and communication as between the peer review administering entity and the board, but still respecting the confidentiality of the peer review process. And so hopefully, Wendy, from your perspective, we're beginning to get those informations, and the communications are just much improved over what they were, say, 5 or 7 years ago.
Yeah, so as a reminder to board members, beginning last year with the firm renewal, we began requiring firms to submit their report and corresponding documents at renewal, and we look at each one of those to make sure that they are in line with when we expected them to have a peer review. This year will be a little different, I think, with the number of folks receiving an extension, so we'll just have to work through that process and let that play out, and maybe something we have to check on next year for those particular firms.
So Wendy, they just upload their most recent peer review report that's been accepted by the committee. So if they're one they would have normally uploaded in 2020 is not available, they'd go back and upload the previous one.
Correct, the report and the acceptance letter, so that we know it's been accepted, because as you might expect, many firms don't realize they're not supposed to give their report until it's accepted. So we have some of those cases that happen as well. But yes, we ask for both documents. So in the next year or so, FSBA will be populated with all that information, but we just don't have it yet because it's just taking a few years to get all of that into the database.
Katie, Richard, or Art, any further comments that you all have? Board members, any further comments or questions? Just appreciate very much the work that you all are doing, and we know how important a quality peer review program is to the profession and to our practitioners in Tennessee. And sometimes it's hardest to discipline your friends. And to have someone, a professional, look over your work, that's not sometimes an easy or natural thing to do or to be done upon you. So it's just greatly appreciated, and thanks very much for hanging with us and giving us this update.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I think what we'll do, if we may, Larry, if you're comfortable with this, is we'll jump back to the Law and Rules Committee. You've got at least one action item, and then we'll finish out with the remaining portions of the Executive Committee. Larry, I've got you on mute here, so go ahead when you're ready.
Oh, I thought you were saying you were going to go back to, so you want me to go ahead? Okay. We'll call the Laws and Rules Committee in session, and we only have one item to deal with. You remember at the last meeting we had, we talked about a revision. We requested in her staff to cases where a licensee was reactivating their license or renewing a license or coming out of expiration or deactivation. So in those two cases, we had asked her to, and the staff, to come up with some wording on that, to include a requirement that that they would have to have CPE related to ethics as part of the CPE that would be required to reactivate or reinstate. And so the document that Wendy sent us out this week includes that language, but in addition includes language to require that extra CPE for ethics also in the case of a license holder who was renewing with less than a 2-year cycle. So in other words, when you first get your license the first time, with it being odd years and even years to renew, sometimes you'll have a case where your first renewal is less than 2 years to get renewed. So the third situation that's on this document that you were sent out in advance was to also include CPE related to ethics in that case also. And I have one question, Wendy, that I thought of just this morning when reviewing some of this to prepare for the meeting. In looking at the basic requirements in the rules, in the licensing rules and so forth, when an applicant has is renewing their license and they work in the attest function, or if they're renewing their license and they work as an expert witness, they also have to have another requirement where they have to have a certain amount of their CPE related to those two areas. Is that something we should think about in this too? So if you're reapplying or reactivating a license where you did work in those functions or you intend to work in those functions, should that be considered here too? Or would that be making an assumption before you knew what you were going to actually do or not?
Well, my personal thoughts on that are that those, I had not thought about it. Let me say that. I think that potentially the board could feel that the attest function it is important to have some CPE there, and we could take that up at a later time if that's something the board feels strongly about. From an expert witness standpoint, I don't necessarily think that needs to be plugged in here, but again, that's just my personal thoughts on a new licensee and the thought that they would be doing expert witness in their first year.
Yeah, I think in the case of the less than 2-year licensee, where they're having a short period license renewal, I think it would be tough for those people to know if they were going to do expert witness work. Yeah. But in the reactivation and the renewal from an expired license or a reactivated license, those folks normally will know if they're going to do a test work or do expert witness. But you're only going to have a 2-year period where you would have to do that anyway. So, I mean, in other words, you'd only go 2 years without having that specialized CPE. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's a big deal. I just thought something we ought to consider, or at least talk about in the committee. So
keep in mind that to reactivate or reinstate, your CPE requirement is all technical. I know it's not specific to a test, but your full complement of 80 hours does have to be technical. So the likelihood, you know, that you're getting a test in there, you know.
Yeah, my battery's about to go down, so I'm trying to plug in here. Okay, yeah. Yeah, there's a likelihood that in the 80 hours that you have some attest, but no guarantee. Yeah. So anyway, that up. I just wanted the committee to at least another requirement that is in the renewal of those particular categories of licensees that could be added. But what we're talking about today is just adding the ethics requirements. So open it up for what everybody thinks about that. Did everybody get a chance to read the document that was sent out? It was just a 1-page document. Any comments, questions, or are there any thoughts from anybody else on this attest function requirement for renewals or reactivations? Crickets. If not, do I hear a motion to approve what we have in front of us here to recommend to the full board tomorrow?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. I assume that motion is to approve the document we have in front of us.
Correct.
Okay. You want to do a roll call vote on that? Any discussion? Any further discussion?
So, Larry, this is just to confirm, this is, and I think you said this, but I just want to make it clear that we added a piece versus what we talked about last time. So it's adding the 2 hours state specific, board approved course, to those who are reactivating, reinstating, or individuals in their first license renewal. Those are the three areas. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned that at all. If I didn't, I meant to. This is one step further than what we talked about in the last meeting. It's also adding the category of folks who are renewing a license that's less than 2 years old. But I think that's good. I think it should be there too. So having said that, the folks who made the motion in the second, your motion and second still good?
As far as I'm concerned, it is, yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we need a roll call vote then, I guess.
Larry Elmore.
Yes.
Janet Booker Davis.
Aye.
Gay Moon.
Yes.
Hilton.
Aye.
Judy Weatherby.
Aye.
Okay, that's the only item we had for our committee.
Okay, thank you, Larry. We will hop back to the executive committee report. We've already covered off on the peer review update. And so the next item is the 2020 CPE audit results, which are good news and directly reflective of policy decisions that this board made. And for that, I'll turn it over to Wendy.
All right. Hopefully everybody's got this document and had a chance to look at it. I think we do have some great news here. We ended up selecting 556 individuals for CPE audit for the 2018-2019 period. That represents 10% of licensees, which is in our policy of what we select. And the top box there shows you how those 556 break down. We had 503 of those individuals were compliant upon initial review. So when they submitted their information to us, they were compliant or they had already provided penalty hours or carryover to meet the requirement, or they were home state exemption candidates because they live and work in another state and are licensed there. So that was 90% of our, 90.63% of our 556. So we had 52 individuals non-compliant at initial review. 40 of those have subsequently submitted penalty hours, bringing us to 97.84%. And we have 12 people remaining that still have some CPE due to us. Typically, if they have 8 hours or less, we give them 30 days. And if they have more than 8 hours due, we'll give them 90 days to complete the requirement. So 12 individuals are still working their way through completing those penalty hours. One individual was removed from the population due to having a closed license. And so excellent, because for John's benefit, prior to requiring individuals to submit a listing of their CPE at renewal, which we started last year, we had close to a 29% non-compliance rate. So this is excellent news. Another item I'll point out in that first box there is we had 0 non-responses. So we typically open 10 complaints or so a year due to an individual not responding to the audit. So this is multifaceted. First, a policy decision, I think that was important to this outcome. And second, just a shout out to staff, to Leanne Blair on staff, who is responsible for the continuing education audit, and Karen oversees that. And so the work that Leanne has done to encourage these folks to respond and provide what's needed has been outstanding this year. So we will not be opening any complaints due to non-response. So that's great news. The bottom section of the document there shows you the various benchmarks that individuals have to comply with, and the number of penalty hours assessed, and the number of individuals that were assessed that penalty. One of the items to note here is that the highest non-compliance area is state ethics, which I have mentioned to you all before. And then there were, on a side note, 28 individuals where state ethics was the only thing that they missed. And so we did do an email a few weeks ago trying to remind folks of that requirement and where they can obtain an approved course to meet that requirement. And I think that concludes the information on this sheet. Happy to take questions.
I just think, Wendy, this is just an excellent example of the board and staff reacting to a concern and making good policy. I realize it requires a little more upfront work on the part of our practitioners, but ultimately they should still be keeping a listing of their CPE credits. They just have to submit it up front. And I think that's alleviated a lot of problems and hopefully contributing to the reduced complaint load, that we were discussing earlier in the meeting. So this is just a really good policy driven outcome, and hopefully we can keep up the good work in this area. But thanks to you, but also to the staff as well, as you mentioned, for dogging this through. And we were a little bit flexible with respect to the timing due to the COVID crisis, but to have 0 non-responses is a great testament to the CPAs out there in Tennessee that are licensed here, and they're acting responsibly. That's just incredibly great news. Any other questions or comments? Not, we will proceed to the fiscal year 20 year-to-date closing and fiscal year 21 year-to-date result overview. And Wendy, I'll turn that back over to you to just highlight any items of interest.
All right, I'll start off with our FY20 closing results. These are preliminary results. We usually have final results by this point, but we do not have them yet. So these numbers could change slightly, but I don't see a dramatic change at this point. So what you will see on the first page, I think I separated these documents. Yeah, FY20 closing is a document on its own. Okay. So you will see here that our revenues for the year were at $1,013,550. That's net revenues after you add the case and complaint and remove our state reg fee. So that is higher. Our revenues were higher than we have seen in the past few years. This can be attributed to, I think, given the CPE reporting requirement, we had a significant number of folks that did not renew by January 31st and therefore had late fees assessed. And so we had something around $40,000 in late fees that we may not have seen if those folks had completed the CPE and renewed on time. So that's where that increase in revenue is coming from. And so let's see here. When we go on to the expense side, we had total expenses of $631,442. As salaries and benefits are $504,000 of that. And then you add our cost backs of $224,292, brings our total expenses to $855,734. And that left us on the positive of $157,821, which is, of course, higher than normal. Some of our expenses had been reduced due to COVID, travel, and then, of course, our revenue was significantly on the upside. So we are putting $157,000 into our reserve balance, which will bring that to $1.411 million.
I'm thinking I'm going to do red beans and rice.
Maria, can you put yourself on mute?
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
People asking what's for supper.
So that is our closeout for FY20. Does anybody have any questions on where we are there?
I just want some red beans and rice now. Sorry.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
Full disclosure, it's from a can, so.
Better than none.
Wendy, I had a couple of questions on the report.
Okay.
On the cost backs, we go from 140,000 last year to 97 this year under administration. Does that have something to do with the fact that there's been less cost to allocate, or they changed the allocation, or what?
I have not been advised that they've changed the way they allocate. So it's my understanding that the costs were just reduced over the past year, and the assessment or the allocation, of course, is less than. It could relate to some travel. Keep in mind that, folks in the commissioner's office, the assistant commissioner's office, travel as well. So some of that, there were likely some cost savings in some other areas. We have not been advised as to why that number is less than what we typically see.
Okay, let me ask you this. Could it somehow be related to rent, since you have less office space now?
We do not pay for rent through cost backs. We pay for rent on our direct expenses up under the $631,000.
Okay. All right, one other question on cost backs. The line that says centralized complaints, why is that just showing up the last 2 years? Was that a different way of showing that, or what?
So they implemented a centralized complaints division. So it used to be that when complaints would come in, they would come to a board staff member and we would administratively handle those. And they implemented, actually it was earlier than that. I think it was 17 that they implemented that, but we began being charged for it later on. But basically we have kind of a call center group that handles the administrative side of complaints. So a complaint comes in, a response is requested, that information is then forwarded to legal. That administrative function is handled by a centralized division, and our specific staff does not deal with that.
Okay.
Hey, Wendy, I have one question. I know we've talked about this throughout the years, but at what point does our reserve get unfavorably too high?
That's a moving target, Stephen. There is no set policy for the department. They have been questioned on that verbally. They have mentioned 2 years of operating costs as being a benchmark. We're not quite there. Some boards are way above that. Some are in the red, so it varies. And there has not been a policy for that.
Okay, like I said, I thought we at one time decided one time's revenue was getting up, getting to the high point, but I'm just curious. I know we talked about it a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
Even one other kind of data input on that is that when we went before the Joint Operations Committee for our sunset review, we sat there in that hearing room with several, probably 24 other boards, and that was a question that was episodically asked of various other boards, and it was noted at the time that the data was available for our review that it was sitting just a tad over 1 year, and that seemed to not provoke any undue concern at that time. Now, again, that was pre-COVID and a lot of water under the bridge, but it did not appear that we were dancing too far into unreasonable territory, at least in that hearing.
Any other comments on this document? Okay, I'll move on to the next one. Kevin, is that okay? Okay. The next document, which is in the same bullet, is our current year-to-date operating results, which we are only 2 months into the current fiscal year. So we don't have a lot of data to go on yet. you'll see that our revenue is in line with the prior year, which is what you'll see on the second document that I provided you. It shows this is as of August of this year, so it includes data from July and August, and I show it against our budget and against the prior year. So revenue is flat to the prior year, and probably the items to note on here are going to be salaries and benefits are still trending higher than we have typically expected it to. And we do have an additional team member who's added to their benefits, and I believe that's where that's showing up. In travel, you'll notice we have no expense this year. Obviously, with COVID, there is no travel currently going on. Under third-party and administrative services, we are at only $602 this year versus $7,000 last year, and that is related to NASBA dues are $6,000, and that invoice just hit earlier last year than it did in the current year. So the last item that I'll note is the state professional services. We're at $8,200 this year versus only $1,350 last year at the same point in time. And we are venturing down the road of some heavy IT costs. We launched a significant upgrade to our licensing platform in September. There was a lot of lead up to that, and I do expect some continuing IT costs that were higher than the previous years to show up there for the next few months as they're really gearing up for a lot of improvements on the technology side. You all will see on the public search side of things, if you go look for a license on our website, that has pretty much been the same for a number of years, and there are going to be a complete overhaul of that. And that is the next big endeavor, and so we're hoping in the next few months that they will have that launched in the new format. And so overall, our revenue is at $18,485. Expenses coming in at $95,645 year to date, with cost backs at $26,934. Total expenses, sorry, at $122,579, putting us in the red at $104,094, and that's expected until we get through renewal season, where we actually bring in a significant amount of revenue. So we'll see some negative months for a while, but that will pick up after renewals. So does anybody have questions on current financial information? Okay, are we ready to move on to the budget for the FY 2022 year? That's where we are. All right. Okay, so statute does require this board to approve a budget, and we are looking today at a fiscal year 22 budget starting January 1, 21 through June 30 of 22. So of course, a lot has happened, a lot can happen between now and June of 21 when we would start this budget, but I will walk you through kind of my thought process on where we stand today with this budget. So the first piece of the document shows you our actual for 18-19, our preliminary results, which you saw earlier for 20, and then our current budget for the current fiscal year and a proposed budget for fiscal year 22, which is what I'm going to ask you all to vote on at the end of the presentation and discussion. So I'm just going to start down from a revenue and go down the line and talk through these items on my summary report, and you can stop me or we can talk about questions at the end. As far as revenues go, I am projecting the revenue at $1,007,000. We do not include case and complaint revenue in our revenue number. And I am also assuming that roughly $40,000 in revenue that we received due to late fees is not going to reoccur 2 years from now. So I have not included that. So that is the revenue number. The state reg fee typically remains the same with a slight increase each year. That is a $10 fee assessed to each individual license issued or renewed to active status. And then there's also a similar $5 fee assessed to firms issued to active or renewed to active status. That fee covers the indirect costs associated with the entire department, including human resources, fiscal, and the commissioner's office. The salaries has an attachment to it, attachment A, which gives you some more detail from a salary standpoint. This assumes a staff of 4, plus the executive director and plus the investigator. It assumes a 2% compensation increase in January of 2022. And so we have been advised by the Department of Human Resources that there will not be any raises in January of 21. And of course, we don't know what's going to happen in January of 22. I've put a modest increase in there to account for the unknown in that area. Longevity and salary cap bonus line item. So longevity does continue to be paid out regardless of salary increases. And so what we likely would not see there would be any bonuses or money somebody received for merit increase or something of that nature. And so working through the longevity is at roughly $3,000. I did put a little bit in there for a potential bonus or something in January of 2022 as just to cover in case something like that occurs there that's determined by the state. Employee benefits are typically computed at 37% of salaries and longevity. We have been running higher in this area, so I calculated this at 40% of salaries and longevity, and that brings our estimated benefits at $146,339. So if you take the salaries, $357,849 plus the longevity, plus the benefits, and then add in the salaries for board members at board meetings, our total personnel budget is $516,188, which is roughly half of our overall budget. As we move into travel, I have assumed in this scenario that we will start traveling again, and so attachment B covers travel as we have done similarly in the past. And so I have budgeted for board members and the executive director to attend NASPA regional and annual meeting, and then the executive directors meeting and investigators conference that occurs in March each year, and some miscellaneous travel across the state if needed in various other months. Some money is there for investigative travel across the state, which has been very minimal lately, and travel for board members to board meetings. And that's, of course, assuming we begin to meet in person again beginning the middle of next year. Communications and shipping, I expect, is going to remain the same or similar. Third-party professional services, again, I don't expect any major changes there to those types of expenses. Supplies and furniture, similar. Rentals and insurance, similar. Motor vehicle operation, since we created the budget for fiscal year 21, they have required us to rent cars to travel, and so this just gives us some money there for any rental that I may need to go to various speaking engagements across the state. Awards is a minimal budget line there. Unclassified used to be the professional privilege tax for any CPA staff members. Of course, that does not need to be included in the budget any longer. Employee training, this includes the registration fee for NASBA conferences as well as the CPE for professional staff included there. So I have kept that the same as our previous budget due to, again, assuming we will continue traveling to NASBA meetings. Computer-related items, I did give this a healthy line item. Everyone on staff is going to be up for computer replacement in the next year or two, so I wanted to make sure to cover that there. State professional services, this is where our rent is included. We talked about a little bit ago, Larry, but our rent is included in state professional services. We also have IT support tickets related to our board specifically, telephone, administrative judges provided by the Secretary of State's office, charges for our state vehicle, printing services, and our IT costs will likely be stronger than we've seen in the past. But of course, our rent may decrease too. They're looking to further reductions due to COVID and reducing our space even more here at the building. And so I am projecting that at just slightly over the current year budget. Year-end costbacks is such a moving target. I have basically taken an average and put that in there as the year-end costbacks. So with all of that being said, our net revenues after the reg fee is being proposed at $935,000. Regular expenditures at $689,638. Year-end costbacks at $250,000, giving us a total expenditures of $939,638, which would leave us in the red at $4,638. You'll notice we did, I believe for the past 2 years, we've approved a negative budget. A lot of that is because we do expect some type of case and complaint in there from a revenue standpoint to help make up that difference and potential expenses that don't to come to fruition. So I've talked a lot. Y'all have any questions that we can discuss?
I have a couple, Wendy.
Sure.
You said the rent is in that professional services. Mm-hmm. What year was it that y'all moved out and started working from home and the rent? Why didn't the rent show us a gradual decline there over the years? Because you have a lot less office space now, don't you?
Yes, and it was reduced by 2/3. We were paying around $3,000 or so. We're now paying about $1,200 a month in rent. That's a pretty big line item. There are a lot of items included in that particular line item. And so some of the other costs have been a little bit more, and specifically on the IT side, and have not showed an overall decrease in that particular line item.
Okay. And you said on year-end costbacks, that 250 is just an average of the last few years.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's such a hard one to really pinpoint where we're going to land there.
One other question on the longevity pay. You defined how you get that over here, but you said you had to be hired before 2015 mm-hmm. and have been there 3 years. Mm-hmm. Was that why you don't have any?
Yes, there's 4 staff members eligible, and then Scott and I started after they changed the policy, so we are not eligible for it.
Okay. So everybody that's getting it there has been there since before 2015?
Or they have, or they had prior state service. So okay. for instance, Sherry didn't start with us until after 15, but she had prior state service.
Okay, that answers my question. Mm-hmm. All right, that's all I got.
Any other questions or comments for Wendy on the proposed fiscal year 22 budget?
I just have a quick question about like the bonus feature that you talked about, that line item, is that up to the board to determine, or is that I guess the director of commerce and insurance, or who decides that?
So it is based on, no, it's not up to the board. So it's part of the pay for performance legislation that Haslam put into place. And so if you received a higher than valued on your annual review, then you're eligible for a bonus. And then that is determined by Department of Human Resources or someone higher up in the state that determines what that payout would be. So let's say two people on staff received an advanced rating on their reviews, and the state says, okay, we're gonna give everyone that has an advanced rating a 3% bonus. Then those people would receive that, but they may decide that they're giving a 1% bonus to those folks. So it's determined at a higher level based on your results of your annual review.
Well, I mean, I guess because you basically work for the board, and I don't think we have any input in that kind of stuff. I don't know. I mean, I think everybody on this board knows you're the best executive director in the country. And I mean, if there's any way we could somehow participate in making sure that you're taken care of, I'd certainly like to know about it.
Kevin, do you want to speak on that? Because I know you've talked to Toby about that.
Well, I will. And Judy, I share your sentiments exactly. And the board does not really have a direct control or say over the executive director's compensation. But what I have done is I've had multiple communications, including a direct conversation with the deputy commissioner, extolling Wendy's work. You know, as things exist now, we don't have a formal written role in an evaluation, but the way that we are basically doing that is providing input to the deputy commissioner, who does have some role into the written evaluation. And I have expressed very strong sentiments along the lines of what you have expressed, Judy. And so Toby is well aware of those sentiments and has indicated that he takes those into account.
Okay.
Go through that process.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we weren't just dropping the ball on something that we really shouldn't drop the ball on. So
absolutely, and it's a little bit unusual that we don't have a direct formal role that really is controlled by the Department of Commerce, but we have input, and you know, I provided that input as the chairperson to express exactly the sentiment that you just did.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate you doing that, Kevin.
You're welcome. Any other questions with respect to the FY22 proposed budget? I believe this is an action item, Wendy. I'm presuming we would act on this tomorrow as a full board in the meeting versus an executive committee item. Is that, am I recalling correctly how we normally have done that?
Yes, you can make a recommendation to the full board if you'd like, or you can just wait to discuss tomorrow. Okay.
I would just say let's wait and we'll just deal with this on bank as a full board tomorrow, and it will require action on the part of the board. But I think you've gone through it in sufficient detail here, so we've got a good you know, overview there. Just a couple of last minute items here before we adjourn. One is to remind ourselves that we start at 8:30 a.m. Central Time tomorrow morning for our actual official meeting as a board. And then also just one follow-up, and this relates back to the TSCPA ethics course, I think in response to a question that Janet had asked earlier about in our role as an oversight capacity, can we have access to the actual course as presented by the Tennessee Society? You know, not to take it tuition fee for credit, but just to look at the course. What I would ask board members to do if they wish to do that if Kara will send the link to Wendy, and you could just let Wendy know that you'd like the link to that so you can review it. If you're going to review it and take it for credit, you need to pay your tuition, the appropriate Tennessee Society fee that the board has agreed upon. But I think if you're just looking at it from an oversight standpoint and not applying for credit, it sounds like the Tennessee Society is comfortable with that approach. So just let Wendy know, and then she will forward you the link after she receives it from the Tennessee Society. With that, that's all that I have. Any other comments or questions?
Can I have one question? Wendy, is it appropriate and encouraged that we participate in the annual NASBA annual meeting? I mean, there's no cost, right?
Correct. And I have that in my executive director's report tomorrow, just encouraging you all to register if you can.
It's listed as today is the last day. I don't know if that was, I don't know if it is, that's true, but it says the 19th.
Oh, okay. I did miss that. So an encouragement to everyone to take a look at that email. If you search NASBA, you should be able to get it to come up. I believe I saw a listing last week. Andy, Larry, myself, and Pam maybe are registered.
I'm on there now, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think
it only takes a minute to register.
Yeah, and I am as well now.
Okay.
Yeah, I would highly encourage it because it's going to talk about CPA evolution, about where we go from here. We're going to talk about the accounting educator's role in evolution, which would be very interesting, specifically after we had our accounting educators in the state get on a call with NASBA and the AICPA. And they're going to do an update on the uniform CPA examination and what's occurring right now. That they're going to talk about ethics and COVID-19 and what's going on in the world. But the board of accountancy, the issues and impacts that we have with COVID too, which is a really good topic, plus a legislative update, which really we have some stuff going on in Tennessee. So I would challenge everybody on the board to sign up. It's free. You get very informed about what's going on with the state boards of accountancy and the changes that are coming, because there's going to be a lot of changes, and this is your time for input and feedback and to understand the issues.
There's a lot coming up that will directly affect the board, that the board will be asked to make decisions about. So I'm on a NASBA task force that's talking about the transition from the current system to CPA evolution. And it sounds like it's a long time from now because it takes effect 2024, but we have to transition into that. And there's just a lot of discussion. So I think the more information everybody can get, the better.
I agree, Pam, and thank you for that update, Andy. What I know and red beans and other good things may be on the stewing pot for more than one of us. So it's 5 o'clock. We will go ahead and adjourn our committee meetings, and then we'll plan to convene at 8:30 in the morning. Again, we do not have a hearing tomorrow. We will just have our regular full board meeting, but we'll have plenty of items, as we saw from our committee activity, to get through. So see everyone tomorrow morning, and thank you for hanging in there and for participating so well in the committee work. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.